Okay, good evening. This is the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee on Tuesday, the 16th of January. Okay, if you'd like to take your seats, yeah, right. Right, the role of Overview and Scrutiny is to provide independent, critical friend challenge and to work with the council's executive and other public service providers for the benefit of the public. The committee considers submissions from a range of sources and reaches conclusions based on the weight of evidence, not on party political grounds. This meeting may be filmed for inclusion on the council's website. Please note that other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of these images or recordings is not under the council's control. So, okay. So, first item, apologies for absence.
None received, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So, move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Has anyone got any comments on the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 15th of November? Nope. Okay, would someone like to propose?
I'll propose.
Andrew propose, Chris to second. Does everyone like to vote whether we're happy with the minutes? Right, carried. Thank you. Okay, so declarations of interest. Has anyone got a declaration of interest? No. Good. Okay, public question time.
We have no public questions and no member questions, Chair.
Right, thank you. Okay, so we move on to item 61, Thames Water. So if we could, we welcome back Richard Aylard and Nikki, who's met us before as well, so online. So yeah, if I could just pass over to you then, Richard.
Well, thank you very much and good evening, everybody. For those I haven't met, my name is Richard Aylard. I'm the Sustainability Director at Thames Water and have a particular focus on river health at the moment. But obviously, as a member of the senior team, I've collected answers to a number of other questions that you've asked. So if I could just do a quick update. I mean, I think the first thing is that we had what I found a very interesting and enjoyable visit to Wargrave Sewage Treatment Works, which a number of councillors attended. And of course, there's no better way to answer questions than actually see things and meet the site team and understand what was going on. It's a bitterly cold day, but apart from that, it was a good visit. We've also said that we would be very happy to provide briefings on or even further visits on issues around surge discharges, leaks, investment plans for parish councils and community groups, if anybody would like us to do that. And I think we're down to attend the Borough Parish Liaison Forum later in the year. So we'd be happy to do that. There were some issues raised by Councillor Johnson about the performance of the Graiseley Road and 3 Mile Cross pumping stations. And as a meeting held on the 19th of August, which involved Councillor Jones and Councillor Fishwick and others, I'm told that was helpful. And an update on that is that we have completed a lot of work in the area, but we still need to decommission fully and abandon the old 3 Mile Cross pumping station. So you may still see that still being there, but that's actually been replaced by the new pump station in the Taylor Wimpey site. So that was a good question, and that's ongoing. And I hope the meeting was helpful. We said we would update you on the business plan submission to Ofwat. I think you've all had a copy of the summary document. The main document runs to a great many more pages but very happy to pick out any bits that anybody would like to have a look at when you've seen that. If there are questions, and some of it isn't always as obvious as it might be, then very happy to pick that stuff up outside the meeting. There was a question about payment of dividends to shareholders. I did answer that in writing and got all the details. I'm happy to do it again today. Basically, we haven't made any dividend payments for we're in our 7th year of not paying dividends other than for interest payments, because a bit like the mortgage, you've got to pay those before you do anything else. So when people talk about profits by Thames Water, yes, there are profits, but it's all being reinvested. Nothing is going out of the company at the moment. And that's likely to be the situation for some time to come with the challenges that we've got. So if you have seen the business plan submission, you'll see that we're putting in for £18.7 billion of investment. How does that compare to the current period? We put in for about 10. We put in for 11 and got 10. So it's a very big step up, and that will fund a lot of improvement work. And a particularly big chunk of that is to reduce storm discharges that we talked about quite a lot at the last meeting. You asked me to give you more details about leakage in the borough, and it's complicated because for 2 reasons. One is it's not only us that supplies water. More of Woking is South East Water than it is Thames Water. The other thing is that we managed leakage through what we call district metered areas. It's an area, as the name suggests, where all the houses are covered by 1 meter, so we can see how much you're putting into the area. Unfortunately, our district metered areas respect water pipe boundaries and not borough boundaries. So I can't give you a clear answer of exactly how much leakage is in Wokingham Borough. But across the Thames Valley area, it's in the region of 25%. And that's made up, broken up into 3 ways. The first third of that is actually the leakage on our pipes. Another third is leakage on customer pipes, which in this country, actually uniquely in the world, we count as the water company leakage, despite the fact on customer pipes. And this is one of the things why our smart metering program will allow us to identify where that leakage is happening on customer pipes, and we can then get in and help to get it solved. And the third element of leakage is what we call wastage, which is dripping taps, leaky loos, which are the ones that are always just running slightly. So a lot of work to get leakage down. We've done a lot. There's a lot more to do. There's a fair bit of mains replacement going on in the area. But the main thing is going to be those smart meters. That's a really big step forward for us, because once we know how much each house is using, we can look at the occupancy. We can say to people, we think your leakage, your usage is much more than we'd expect. And then we can get in and we can see if they've got a leak often under the front garden. Somebody's put a spade in a bit too deep, dented a pipe, might have been last year, might have been 10 years ago, and it will have been leaking ever since. So we can get in and sort those out. But if there are any specific areas the council want to look at, we can drill down if we have road names or postcodes, if there are areas where you think there's particular concerns. And we've done that before when we had low pressure issues in Shinfield. I think in terms of the smart metering, we had a meeting in September, I think, Nikki, with the council and officers, and talked about the rollout of meters in 2024. I hope we've been rolling out smart meters now borough by borough. We started in London and now we're working across Thames Valley. So it's a reasonably well tried and tested machine that comes along and it interacts with the council, highways, and then with customers. And there shouldn't be any specific problems occurring, but if there are, then obviously we'd like to know about that, and we can get it sorted out. We've put in 900,000 smart meters so far, so we think we've got a reasonably good idea how to do it. But there's always new things that crop up. What else do we have? There was an agreement to meet the council officers about issues relating to delays in the adoption of infrastructure linked to new housing development. I think, Nikki, you asked for a list of sites of concern, and when we get that, then we can set up those discussions. Yeah. So we think the actions with the council on that one. We're very happy to have further discussions on learning points from the sinkhole incidents. I've got some more notes on those. What we really want to know is what are the specific, we don't want to go over everything again, but if there are specific things that you think we haven't learnt from, then we're happy to discuss those. But at the moment, with the whole area underwater, until very recently, incident teams are pretty busy. So we will certainly set up discussions if officers or individual councillors have particular concerns. And I think there were then some additional questions, weren't there? Yeah, I was asked about the implementation of Schedule 3 of the Floods and Water Management Act. For those of you who haven't come across this before, in 2010, the government passed a bill which became an act called the Floods and Water Management Act. And that did two things. Schedule 3 was brought in approving bodies for sustainable drainage, and it removed the automatic right of developers to connect into our system. But the secondary legislation was enacted enacted. So that sits on, it's written on the act, but it's not part of the law because the government have never brought it in. We have been, as an industry, we've been lobbying the government ever since to do it. And we've had quite a lot of support from councils, from MPs. And when I last came to you, I said that the government had committed to consult on that in the autumn of 2023. You may not be surprised to know there has been no consultation. Not just no report of a consultation, the consultation hasn't started. And we don't know when it will start, but we do know that the housing developers are lobbying for it not ever to happen. So I think possibly you might think that the government are in a bit of a bind here. They've made a promise, but they're being persuaded not to do it. Whether it gets done before a general election, I don't know. It's an important piece of work as far as we're concerned, because at the moment developers can insist on connecting surface water into our sewers. And as we discussed at the previous meeting, surface water eats up valuable capacity in the foul sewer and potentially causes both discharges from overflowing networks and overflowing sewage treatment works. So we want this enacted. That's why it was in the bill in the first place. But it's not up to us, it's up to the government. So if anybody wants chapter and verse, links and things, I'm very happy to provide those, but I can tell you that there's no consultation. Update on our financial position. Okay, that's in two parts, really. I think in terms of the money required to run the operations of the company now and into the future, there isn't a problem. We've got 3.5 billion of liquidity, and so things are going on as normal. The issue, to the extent that there is one, is about the longer term funding. How do we make sure we've got enough funding coming in to do all the things that government, regulators, customers want us to do? And those are the discussions which our shareholders are having with the government and others at the moment, Ofwat in particular, but it doesn't affect the day-to-day operations of the company. So when people say you haven't fixed that leak because you run out of money, that's not true. If we haven't fixed the leak, it's because we haven't fixed the leak. It's not because we've run out of money. The financial position of the operating company is perfectly healthy and continuing normally. I was asked about the priority services register. Now, this is where people are. It's basically to help people who wouldn't be able to get to a bottled water station if the water went off. So those who are elderly, disabled, infirm, have just had an operation, with very young children, people who might have a medical condition, which means that the water goes off, they've got a problem with the dialysis machine. Those people can register on our priority services register, and that means we take their details, and if the water does go off, then we'll ring them up and we can say, can we deliver some bottled water? Will you be in? And we'll get it there by van, and we'll hand it to people rather than expecting them or the neighbours to go and collect it from a bottled water station, which regrettably is what we have to ask able-bodied customers to do. So we've got 64,000 billed accounts in Wokingham, and we've got 5,623 people on the priority services register, which is 9%. Slightly below the average across our area of 11%. And if the council wanted to put anything in newsletters or any way of reaching people to explain what priority service register is all about, we'd happily give you some material for that, contact phone numbers and things, because it's in everybody's interest to get this sorted. So more than happy to collaborate on that. And that, Chair, is the list of the questions that I was given. And if I've forgotten anything, very happy to pick it up now or later.
Okay, thanks very much, Richard. So I'll open it up to questions from the floor then. Andy.
I've got a very small one. It's actually related to your last point.
Yep.
Priority services restriction. Oh, you're such a small point. Small. Right, okay, so I'll start again. So it's related to the priority services register, and I have a feeling it's outside of your area because it relates to the north of Wokingham town rather than Wokingham borough. And it's a gentleman I was talking to, and he's registered for the priority services register. He's now getting text after text warning him of leaks in his area. And that's not what he wants. He's certain that there's an impending catastrophe that we're not prepared for. So I guess if that isn't your area, can I have some sort of reassurance that that's not what you do in your area? And how do you think, what advice would you give me and to his councillors in terms of getting it fixed so he's not very worried about the...
I mean, the first thing is very happy to check the postcode if you want.
Yep.
We'll get back and let you know.
Yep, I'll do that in a minute.
Yep. And we can certainly, I mean, all water companies have versions of this register.
Yes.
We can get you. Is it possible?
That would be amazing. That would be perfect. Yeah. I'm just going to look at the postcode.
Would you like to put the microphone on? Sorry.
Sorry, yeah. I'm just saying we'd be happy to put the customer or Councillor Croy in touch with our opposite number in South East Water and explain why this is a problem. And if they're getting too many messages, then we need to look at that.
I was unable to get a sense of how many per week, but it sounded like they were very, very frequent, and he was very worried about it.
It sounds like a perception problem, but if that's his perception, we need to deal with it.
Yeah, and it might be just a call, just to reassure him of the nature of the leaks. Okay, I will
We'll do that.
get you the note. Thank you.
Okay, Caroline.
Thank you. I'm looking at briefly, and you said you reduced complaints. Is that complaints about your service, or is that reported leaks complaints?
A complaint is anything that is an expression of dissatisfaction.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, that's not meant to be weasel worded, but we anything where people say they're dissatisfied, we log it as a complaint and we deal with it. We try and explain it. Now we do get people who think that they've got Martians sitting inside their pipes, but if they're dissatisfied, we have to do our best to explain it. But also, of course, it's much more seriously. It's people who haven't had a leak fixed, who've asked for a water meter, can't get one, who've potentially got sewer flooding outside their house that we haven't looked at quickly enough. All those things, every one of those is recorded as a complaint.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew.
Thank you, Richard. I've got a number of questions and sort of practical ideas, that the committee, might wish to consider. Firstly, I'd like to just follow up on what you were saying about Schedule 3 and the secondary legislation within Schedule 3 that's not yet been enacted. We do consider ourselves to be a lobbying council, and I think we discussed this during our last, during your last visit. I think that since we are talking about, if I've understood correctly, an issue potentially of considerable importance to some of our residents, surface water being channeled into the Thames water system, with all the potential consequences of that. I think this is something that I would like to recommend this committee considers to making a recommendation, on. And the recommendation would be along the lines, of our officers. And I see Andy is here tonight. He may be the officer responsible for this, to liaise with Thames Water, so that we get more information, and decide whether this is something that we could work together, upon to support. I
think it's quite simple in that it was Rebecca Powell, who was the water minister, who in the House of Commons said we will have a consultation. Rebecca Powell is no longer a water minister, and nothing has happened. And I would suggest that, you'd know more about politics than I do, but I would have thought going to the Secretary of State and saying, excuse me, there seems to be a promise here, what's happened? Because this is important.
Yeah.
I don't think it's more complicated than that, Andrew, to be honest. It's surface water getting into foul sewers when we wouldn't want it there. Developers can find other ways of doing it. If they've got an automatic right, they'll want to use it.
Good.
And then sustainable drainage is really important for new developments.
Yeah.
And we need SUDS approval bodies, and we need to make it happen.
Can we check if Andy is the correct officer?
So yeah, Andy Glencorse, we'd like to just confirm that you are the officer.
Yeah, I'm the service manager for the drainage team, so happy to be the primary contact, and I'll make sure that the right people are involved.
That's good. So I think we'll come back to that later in the form of a recommendation. I'm also going to suggest the committee considers making a recommendation along the lines of us adopting as part of our communication strategies, getting information, about the priority service scheme, out to our residents. So I can think of at least 2 recommendations to begin with. Now I've got some more very specific questions and suggestions, and the suggestions are about how we can work well together for mutual benefit. Andy has just said that he is the point of contact in WBC. Okay. My first question is, can we ensure that there's a consistent known point of contact in Thames Water? Not necessarily an individual, but a post, because of course, personnel change, over time. So is this possible?
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. And the first port of call would always be my colleague Nikki here. Explain your role perhaps a little bit, Nikki. Yes.
Yeah, so I do the stakeholder engagement between sort of councillors, lead councillors and MPs within South Thames Valley and Surrey. So I would facilitate, if the correspondence came through to me, I would facilitate and get it to the right person within Thames.
That's good. That's really good to know. Thank you. And my final question for the moment, if it's okay, I think in this document it's really good to see published targets for reducing pollution spills. Okay, although I think many people, many of our residents might have hoped the reduction targets could have been higher than this. My question is, are there any practical actions that Thames Water and WBC can do together, to ensure that these targets are not only achieved, but hopefully, exceeded? Again, it's about collaboration and it's about networking, and so on.
I think when we talk about pollutions, we need to divide it up into 2. The first one is what we call a pollution incident, which is where something happens that ought not to happen. So there's a power failure, there's a burst in a pipe, there's a blockage, somebody pulls the wrong lever. Any of those things would cause a pollution incident, and they are the ones that tend to be acute and cause huge distress, fish kills, etc. Varying in consequence. So we have a range of things, of training programs, improvements going on in the company. So one of the biggest causes of pollution incidents is blocked pipes. So in the past, it's almost, we do have a program of maintaining sewers. So we're now cleaning 5 times the mileage of sewers as we were 6 or 7 years ago, and that certainly helps. It helps to get the silt out so that you've got maximum capacity there before they overflow, and it also means that we identify where there are tree roots and things getting in. But over and above that, we used to have to wait until somebody said, "Excuse me, there's something bubbling out of this manhole." What we've done now, because the technology is so much cheaper, we've fitted 18,000 depth monitors in the sewers. And what those do is doesn't the name suggest, it tells you what the depth is. And because they're talking via the computer system to each other through, it's not actually artificial intelligence, but it's machine learning. They talk to each other. So if you've got 4 monitors in one area and 3 of them say, "I'm perfectly normal," and one says, "Actually, I'm rather high and I'm getting higher," that's where your blockage is. So we can then get a crew out there and they can start jetting, even though nothing is visible at the surface. And we are now reducing our blockage numbers very significantly with that. But we're also, we've got training programs. We have a program of inspections. I mean, I'm one of people who goes around and actually inspects sewage works from time to time and looks for problems, talks to the site team. We've got much more electronic monitoring now. So that a lot more of the things that were manual in sewage works are now all automated. So there's a readout in the control center in Reading, which shows what's going on. They can start and stop pumps. They can check levels. They can check temperatures. They can bring in probes. And all of that means we can respond more quickly. But it also means we've got an audit trail if something goes wrong, or when did it start going wrong, and why did it start going wrong? And so that will bring the number of incidents down. The other thing we need to do is we need to reduce the number of storm discharges. And these are where the system operates as it was intended to do, which is when it's overloaded, as you saw at Wargrave, just before we're going to cause a problem, it overflows into the storm tanks and you can hold it there. And what we need to do there is, again, as we talked about on the visit, we need to reduce infiltration to stop the surface water getting into the sewers. In some cases, we need to build bigger sewage works. And in some cases, we need to build bigger storm tanks. And each of those things has benefits at different sites. And it's that programme which is going to get the number of storm discharges down. But that is a longer term fix because, as you've seen, you were talking millions of pounds worth of investment at those sewage works. And we have got a big programme. We've got work planned at more than 250 of our sites. But that's over the next 5 years, because actually each of those is a multi-million-pound project. It needs to be designed. It needs to be tendered. And one of the problems, again, as I think we discussed, is that you can't shut a sewage works down while you work on it. So, you can shut the Great Western Main Line, you can shut Heathrow Airport, but you can't stop a sewage works operating. So everything you do has to be in a live environment. So it has to be planned very carefully, because you don't get any, quite rightly, you don't get any let on the standards while the work's going on. So it's a bit like trying to service a car with the engine running. So all that work is going on. So I think that there's two separate things. There's the incidents where something's gone wrong, and then there's the discharges when things have worked the way they should. We don't want them to. So we're actually changing the system to get those numbers down. Slightly long answer, Andrew, but I know it's an important one. So
no, it is, and thank you. But is there anything specific, that?
Yes, there is one thing specifically, which is we've said to our customers, look, if you see anything strange bubbling out of a manhole or running down the street, for heaven's sake, ring us up. They ring the customer centre and then they find they're in a queue because they're behind people who want to talk about their billing or have got a leak. And after 20 minutes, they give up. I'm exaggerating a bit. So what we've done now is we've brought in a report a problem online. So on your smartphone, you can literally feed in the details. What have you seen? Where have you seen it? And then we will immediately dispatch a crew. So if you report a pollution or a potential pollution, and if it sounds to the team when they get it like a pollution, we will have a crew there within 2 hours, 24/7. Normally within an hour. The only reason it takes 2 hours sometimes is usually traffic. But we've got vans. And the other thing is the person who comes isn't just somebody who takes a look and says, yes, there's a problem here. It's two men in a van with lots of kit. So they can start jetting, they can put up sandbags, they can start aeration, they can mitigate. So the quicker we know these things are happening. So if we could get your residents to see this report of blockage online, maybe even have it on their phones. And when they see something, call it in quickly, because speed is of the essence in terms of the environmental damage.
I can see a few nodding heads, so this might be another thing which we might want to recommend our comms team look at.
Yeah, no.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the surface water and new developments. There's still a substantial number of the new developments that are connecting the surface water, and do you monitor what sort of volumes?
Yeah, we certainly do monitor, and we work very hard with to try and get the developers to follow what we call the drainage hierarchy, which is that ideally surface water should be entirely separate and should go straight to the environment. If that can't be done, then it should go to sustainable drainage, which at least will slow it down. And only as a last resort would we accept it into our sewer. And we can put a fair bit of pressure on developers in different ways. And when you get bigger developers, the better known sort of household names, things are usually pretty good. It tends to be the people who perhaps haven't done this too much before, or are trying to develop a stray corner somewhere and they think they can get away with it. And as I say, if they want to insist at the moment, they can. But the related problem is where we have a developer who puts in very neat plans that show surface water going here, foul sewage going this way, and everybody says, well, that looks great, absolutely fine. Then they subcontract the work, and quite often, believe it or not, the subcontractor subcontracts it again. And when they turn up and dig the hole to make the connections, they just connect into the nearest pipe and fill it in ever so quick. And we don't know anything about that until the next wet winter, like now. Somebody says to me or to Nikki, that pumping station, that never used to have a problem in wet weather. And then we have to go back and we have to dig it up and we have to try and find these people. Sometimes they've gone bust and disappeared, and get them to correct it. So we are taking much more care now that before we adopt networks from developers, we actually want to be dye testing and checking. But with the amount of development going on across our area, that's quite a problem. So we do have to prioritise. But it's a live issue because, as I think I explained last time, the surface water sewer outside your house is quite big and the foul sewer is really quite small, and we just need to keep them separate. We don't want foul sewage in the surface water sewer either, because that's going direct to a river, so you can cause a pollution incident that way, and we have to inspect for that too. But the one we're talking about at the moment is when the surface water sewer is cross-connected into a foul sewer. That's a problem.
Yeah, can I just follow up on that? Because last week we had a planning application where we talked about putting a Grampian condition on it to talk to you before they were allowed to go ahead.
Excellent. We're a little bit careful about Grampian conditions because there are people who would like us to recommend them in order to stop development happening that they don't much like. And that's not our job and it's not your job. But we will, if we genuinely believe that we've got an improvement to make and we're going to make it in the next couple of years, then Grampian condition seems pretty reasonable.
Alison.
Thank you. On page 5, you had a figure which is part of a target to achieve by 2030, but 75% of eligible customers on the priority services register. How many is it right now?
I'm sorry, I don't know, but we'll find out for you. I ought to know, but I don't.
Okay,
I haven't got that figure with me.
You spoke about knowing who the people are that needed delivered.
It's a very fair question, and I'm really sorry that I don't. And I can tell you that we've gone up in this borough from 3,042 years ago to 5,744. But what that is as a percentage of the eligible, we'll find out.
Yeah, I mean, we recently had no water in Woodley, and I certainly saw your staff, trotting around delivering water.
Yeah.
I mean, 75% would be great, but obviously 100% of the people most in need. Is what we really need.
Yeah. I mean, this may sound a bit cheeky, but one council that I visited in a very similar meeting to this want to work with us so that they will help us to deliver bottled water in those circumstances using their staff and their vans to make it go quicker. And they're also happy to help man bottled water stations. So if ever you wanted to offer, be happy to follow that up because it would be a really good step forward. But I accept it's council resources and you'll be fairly.
That's certainly something that we could recommend that the council investigates.
Just repeat it. Second.
Would we recommend that the council investigates how viable it would be for our staff to assist Thames Water getting water to vulnerable people when the taps are off? Sorry, I've just got another question.
Yeah, sorry.
On page 8, it mentions 10 significant community projects. Are any of those local to us?
We haven't chosen them yet. If we get the funding, then we'll do a selection process working with councils, and we'll first of all work with councils to see what the criteria ought to be. So we get everyone to agree that, and then we'll actually ask for bids, and we'll have a little group of probably us and 1 or 2 local government experts to select them. So that will be 10 across. We've got 99 boroughs in Thames Water. So we'd like to think Wokingham would get one, but we're not at a position to be able to confirm that. So it will be a competitive.
Said if we get the funding, so
this is our draft business plan to Ofwat, and they will look at it, and they'll look at it from the perspective of what they've heard from customers and the evidence we've provided, and they'll decide whether or not that's a good use of customers' money or not. So it's not impossible that Ofwat will put a line through it. I have to say though that in previous price reviews, and I've been involved in several now, we've made quite a strong pitch for community projects and we've been successful and we've delivered some. So there's a reasonable track record there, but I'm just slightly wary because at the moment, all of the pressure from government is to put every available penny into doing things which are statutory. And they are behind the scenes pushing back quite hard on non-statutory stuff because they want to keep bills down. So being as frank as I can be, reasonably optimistic, but I can't commit to 10 and I certainly can't commit to one in Wokingham, much as I would like to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Stuart.
Yes, good evening. My apologies, I wasn't here in the June meeting, so I probably would have asked this then if I had been there. My ward is Swallowfield, and it has, as you probably are aware, some fairly dire service.
Well, I live in Mortimer, so I know Swallowfield, but I mean, I don't know about the service problems.
Yeah, there is a holding tank outside the village hall that's empty 3 or 4 times a week.
Right.
And it really just can't cope with any.
And that's a wastewater tank, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Waste.
And I imagine that we empty it with a tanker and we're probably emptying it much more often at the moment because the flows are so high.
We are, but it's been like that for 18, 19
right,
years.
Okay.
So I would have asked that question.
We'll very happily come back to you with an answer on that. I'm sorry, I don't know about that particular situation, but I do know that tankering is great because it stops houses flooding, but it's horrible because it means tankers going through narrow streets and parked outside people's houses. So it's a mixed blessing.
And on occasions they can't actually use their facilities in their houses at all. We're talking about 300 houses.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but we will investigate for you.
So, Caroline.
Thank you. On page 10, you reckon by the year 2030, the average bill will go up by £14 a month. I thought metering was going to bring the average bill down. So I'm trying to understand, if I'm being careful, how my bill's going to go up.
Well, these are the average bills. If you're on a meter, though, you can pay very much more or less than average. And when we look at once we get smart meters, we can then see where the consumption is. And you might think it would be a nice sort of bell curve where you'd get some people would be much less and some people would be much more. Actually, it's a bell curve that goes up quite steeply. So there's a limit to how most people are using 100 litres or more per person. And then it goes off way down off the edge of the scale, people who are using huge amounts. And some of those are because they have huge lawns that they want to water every night. Some of them have vintage car collections that they want to wash every weekend. I'm not exaggerating here. We also have dog grooming and poodle parlours where people ought to be registered as a business, and it's one thing that we can, when we see very high water use, we go and have a look around and see what might be going on. But basically, if people do use less water, then they can pay a lower than average bill. And we're also going to be investigating in this period some new sorts of tariff. So we potentially we can charge people a bit less in the winter and a bit more in the summer. We can charge people depending on how much they've said they will use versus how much they're going. There's all sorts of innovative tariffs that are being tested by the industry in order to try and help people. If you remember the sort of economy 7 type tariffs that were common in the electricity industry, we're looking to see whether there are different ways that we can charge to help people who really, really want to save every penny. But the most important thing on that is we have a social tariff. So if people are earning less than, I think it's £17,000 outside London, £21,000 in London, if that's their total income, so it's pretty low, they can get up to a 50% reduction on their bill. But I think the most important message to say to people is, look, if anybody's having trouble paying their bill, please let us know. There are various ways we can help, but we can't help if you don't tell us you've got a problem. So if you could please encourage your residents, they might think, why would I pick up the phone to Thames Water? They'll tell me to pay the bill or they'll cut me off. Well, first of all, we don't cut anybody off ever. And secondly, there are ways to help. And we'd love to have the chance to try.
Adrian.
You mentioned them earlier, the 2 sinkholes that happened in Elmsfield and Evandens Lane. Could you just summarise at a high level the key findings of the, I suppose, lessons learned from those 2 events?
So one of them was that we weren't quick enough to realise, as we should have done, that one of the incidents, the one with the tanker, was right outside a primary school. So that caused significant complications to the emergency works because we needed to protect the public, manage drop-offs, ensure the school experienced minimal disruption. We weren't quick enough to respond to that. I mean, we did respond, but unfortunately the school had to be closed for a few days, and that was a real disappointment to all of us. We did have traffic marshals appointed from the beginning, but they weren't necessarily covering as big an area as they should have done. We worked closely with, it says Edward Day from Highways, with regular calls with him, which seemed to work well. We had drop-in sessions with the school, but we didn't publicise them as well as we probably ought to have done. Complaint management with our customer team wasn't as good as it should have been because the people who were answering the questions weren't well plugged in enough to what was happening on the ground. And we weren't quick enough to help. There was one business that claimed a loss of earnings, and we didn't resolve that quickly enough, which was obviously bad for the business. This was the Kimmel Cafe. We should have done better there. What else? We distributed letters, but perhaps not across a wide enough area. Similarly, notice boards with updates of the works. We realised that, potentially we thought we were covering the area that was affected, but actually people further afield needed to know. We were door knocking at the end of the process, but we ought to have been door knocking earlier on to apologise and explain. We did have a meeting with Councillor Clive Jones, asked about what we were going to be doing. And generally, I think the main theme is about communication. You can never communicate too much. Whatever you do won't be enough. But we felt that there were specific things that we could have done better, and that's been fed back to the teams. And I hope we never have another sinkhole, particularly not one involving a tanker, which was actually pretty unusual. But there have been lessons learned and passed on to the teams. But you may have other lessons that I haven't mentioned that you wanted me to take away.
No, I actually wanted to move on to your financials.
Right.
So obviously I can see this 18.7 billion investment proposal, as you say, draft, in the PR24 document. This is an absolutely massive amount of money, bearing in mind the net debt statutory in the Thames Water interim report for 2023-24 has increased. These are the September numbers, from 13.776 billion in 2022 to 14.738 billion. So it's gone up $1 billion already. Is this 18.7 billion realistic?
Yeah, we believe it is. I mean, all the sums have been done, but I should explain, I'm a biologist, not an economist or an accountant, so you'll have to get my rather simplistic view of it. But the calculations have been done, and a combination of debt and equity and income from customers, we believe, is sufficient to make that programme work. We wouldn't be putting it forward otherwise. I mean, they're pretty dire penalties for failure to invest what should be invested.
Second question on this topic. Does this significant amount of investment depend upon a significant increase in water service bills to customers, to our residents?
Yes, it does involve an increase, and that's been modelled. And Councillor Smith, I think, mentioned £14 a month. I haven't got it in front of me, but it's something like that. But yeah. But this is where Ofwat's job is to look at what we have put forward, and then to see whether what we've put forward needs to be done. And if it does need to be done, what's the appropriate amount to charge customers for it? So they set price limits on the basis of the capital programme that they approve, and then we have to get on and deliver. So they look at what our cost of capital ought to be, both for equity and debt, and then they come up with what's called a final determination of our plan. We're not there yet. It's a draft determination, more discussion, final determination, and then we have two choices, really. One is to accept it and get on with it with whatever we're given, or we can appeal to the Competition and Markets Authority. The problem with the appeal is you can't appeal individual bits of the business plan. You appeal the whole lot, and what that then means is prices stay where they are, and you spend 2 years rerunning the process of a price review, but running it with the CMA rather than Ofwat. And it's because it's such a performance that we haven't done that in the past. But you know, it's an option for the shareholder, the board and the shareholders to decide whether they want to challenge it or not.
You mentioned in your preliminary statements that really there's two ways to reduce spillages and improve water quality, specifically increasing capacity or building new sewage treatment works. What is Woking Borough going to get from this 18.7 billion in terms of new works or improved facilities?
There's really three things we can do. One is we can reduce the infiltration. Now that deals with the problem at source, because wastewater doesn't go up after rainfall because people are taking more showers. It's because the rain's getting in. The problem is you've got to find it, and you've got hundreds of miles of sewers going into a typical sewage treatment works, and you can only find infiltration when it's happening. Dry weather, put a camera down, nothing to see. Wet weather, pipes are full, nothing to see. So finding infiltration is the problem. And also the infiltration may not be on our bit of the network. It may be on private bits of the network further upstream. So it's a bit uncertain, but we do it where we think it's cost beneficial. The second thing is, you mentioned building new sewage treatment works. That will be an absolute last resort, because you can probably imagine that the problems of getting planning permission for a new sewage works. So generally we extend existing sewage works, and we extend them in line with population growth, and we'll be extending them to reduce discharges as well. The third thing but the problem there is that if you make the works too big, it becomes very inefficient in dry weather, because this is a biological process. It's not like turning on another work stream in a factory. You can't just flick a switch. You have to spend weeks building the bugs up to do the work for you. So you don't want too big a sewage works or too small. The third thing you can do is you can build bigger storm tanks. And storm tanks are great, and they're really good at dealing with a huge summer thunderstorm or a very, very wet weekend, because you can hold it in the storm tanks, and as soon as the flow drops down, you pump it back and you treat it. It's a parking area. But if you've got flows that are more than you can treat coming in day after day after day, you'll just keep on filling storm tanks. And getting storm tanks full is easy. Getting them empty is difficult. And if you leave them full for more than a day or so, the sewage in them goes black and stinking and horrible. So your storm tanks and capacity have to go up side by side. As to what's actually going to happen in the borough, we need to get the plans through, and we need to work out how much money we've got for various work streams, and then we apportion it on a priority basis. So I can't give you definite answers for Wokingham at the moment, but that was something that will come once we know what the settlement is.
If we can get a record of that later on, that would be great.
Yeah.
Moving on to clean water, there were comments in the media, I think it was a couple of years ago, talking about saying that there'd been no new reservoir for the southeast since privatisation of the water companies, and that plans for a new reservoir in some fields in Oxfordshire was being, which at that point were deemed critical to clean water provision for the whole of the southeast. Those plans were being blocked by some local council or farmer or something. What is the situation there? And do you think that a new reservoir is really critical for clean water in the southeast?
Well, first of all, it's absolutely true. We Thames Water haven't built a new reservoir since the 70s. And for a long time, that was because we didn't need to, because we were making very considerable reductions in leakage. So that was giving us the extra water we needed to supply a growing population. But we've now got a lot more population growth coming. We've also got climate change factors, and we're also having to give up some of our existing abstractions on environmental grounds. So you've got three things that mean that we're going to need a lot more water in the area. Now, in the past, individual water companies have produced their own water resource management plans. How much water will they need? Where will they get it from? We've now moved to a regional model. So we first of all work with a thing called Water Resources in the Southeast to look at what is the best overall solution for the Southeast. Where does the water come from, and how can we move it around? And that process has completed, and one of the most beneficial schemes was what's known as the Abingdon Reservoir. I'll give it its full name, the South East Strategic Resource Option, SESRO. And that supplies water to Thames Water customers. It supplies water to Affinity Water customers and potentially, although it's not yet certain, to Southern Water customers. So it becomes a regional hub for water. And it's a huge reservoir. I don't know if you know Farmore Reservoir, but in Oxfordshire. Anybody who does know Farmore, this is 6 times the surface area of Farmore, and it's got 11 times the volume. So it's a massive reservoir. And the idea is you fill it from the Thames in the winter when you've got plenty of water, and it will then provide enough water for you to release back into the Thames in dry conditions in the summer. And you'll then top up the flow down to London so that we can abstract as much as we need from our existing abstractions at places like Ashford Common and down through Hampton. It will also supply additional water for supplying the whole of the West Oxfordshire, West Berkshire area by cross connections. So it's a very big scheme. It's going to take a long time to build, and it'll probably be built by an independent company in the same way as we built the super sewer in London. So that's in our business plan. It's gone to the government, and the Secretary of State will, in due course, there's a general election coming, sign off the plan, possibly after calling for a public hearing or a public inquiry. In the past, where water resource plans have had things like reservoirs, which are controversial in, the government's called a public inquiry first. So we don't know. It's entirely in the Secretary of State's gift. He can approve the plan the way it is. He can send it back and say, I don't like it, do it again. Or he can say, let's have a public inquiry about it. And the Secretary of State is sitting on our plan, which and other water companies' plans. In terms of how the reservoir is viewed, we're talking about 20 odd houses that will have to be compulsorily purchased and those people relocated. That's not something anybody wants to do. And it's a big construction project, and people living nearby are rightly concerned about it. So all that has to be weighed in the balance against the decision for whether that's the right thing for water in the southeast. So this is really has to be a government decision. We've put the plan together. We think we've produced the evidence that this is the best way to produce the water. Although it's only part of the plan. When we do water resource planning, the bits that grabs the headlines is a new water resource, a new reservoir or a transfer scheme. But it's built on, first of all, getting leakage down a lot further. And it's built on getting more water efficient use from customers. So that's where things like innovative tariffs can come in. So there's a whole range of things all together.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Sorry, rather long answer.
Very long answer. Just one point for us as the committee. Richard's talking about the heavy lifting from the supply side. From the demand side, we need to talk about the local plan and what the building regs are going to be, and whether you can get stormwater storage to flush your toilet and all these innovative ideas to minimise the amount of usage in the houses in the borough, which would be. I would like that question to go. I'm not sure who that would go to, but thank you very much.
Could I just comment very briefly on that? I mean, the big opportunity is with new development. When people say, but all our customers could retrofit their homes and use their grey water to flush their toilets. Well, yes, they could if they're engineers, and even then they might have to worry about Legionnaire's disease. But if you've got a development of 100 houses, why doesn't it collect all the water off the roofs and the showers and the baths, separate it out from what we call the black water, which is the toilets? We'll take that, thank you very much. But the stuff that is reasonably clean can be separated out, put in a big tank, and people can have a dual network. Now, developers don't do it because it's a bit more expensive, but we've dipped our toe in the water with this because the developers say, stop telling us what we can't do, tell us what we can do. So we are offering a discount on connection charges for developers who build water efficient houses. So we can give you details of that. But you're absolutely right. It's those new developments is where the opportunity is.
Okay, right. Thank you. Andrew,
Yeah, thanks. And we can certainly frame a recommendation to our officers, with respect to that matter. So really, thank you very much indeed. I'd just like to ask a different or tackle a different sort of issue. Later on this evening, we're going to be looking at our Q2 performance data, and I noticed in Q2 78% of utility works were not completed with the timings on their street works permits. This covers all of the utilities. WBC is implementing a process for quality scoring utility companies with the intention of arranging performance monitoring meetings, where necessary, but in a positive, constructive, manner to try to improve, the situation. Now, I also noticed yesterday, and I'll get to the question in just a moment, that the government published yesterday the plan for drivers, and the stated aim of that plan is to try to reduce avoidable delays with street works. But it seemed to me in the government's own press release, that it was focused much more on the revenue side, raising side, of this, rather than in terms of helping to improve, the amenity for drivers. My question is, okay, and again, this is in the spirit, of working together, partnership working, and so forth. Are there any practical ways that Thames Water and WBC could work together to help to reduce this problem, particularly situations which are unfortunately, still far too commonplace, where works have been completed, or in some cases not started, but the traffic control, systems are in place, okay, before or after, the works have been completed. Is there anything that we could, ask our council to do to help on this matter?
Nikki, you may want to come in on this, but I think in my experience, the best thing is really where our streetworks team have a good relationship with the council's highways department and actually challenge each other and phone each other up and say, did you need to do that, or can we help here? There is, I think, in defence of the team, there are times when, particularly if we're leaving concrete to cure, you may not see anybody on site. The concrete just has to literally sit there and go off. The other thing is, after we've done any clean water work, we have to flush the pipes for quite a long time before we reconnect to people's homes, because obviously you can get a bit of dirt inside the pipe. So you have to have good chlorinated water running through for some time. So again, it may be that we're flushing pipes, but this is where it's a good challenge for the highways department to say, we think you've had that road closed longer than you need to. Nikki, any experience? I mean, you've done this sort of thing. I have.
Yeah, no, I haven't really got that much more to add, apart from I don't know how regularly our highways talk to yours, but I can obviously organise something, sort of regular meetings.
Okay, thanks. Any final questions? People haven't asked any questions? No. Okay.
Could I go to recommendation?
Before you do that, can I just say I've today received some written issues from officers, which I will forward on to Richard and Nikki and ask for a written response, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine. If there's issues, we'd like to know about them and we'll respond.
Okay, as we often do, in these meetings, we like to end an agenda item with a series of recommendations based on the discussion. And the first recommendation is, firstly, for this committee to extend its thanks, to Richard and for Nikki for being with us tonight and for being so informative, and open, in your discussion. This is a relationship that I'm sure I can speak on behalf of all of the whole committee. This is a relationship that, we really, really treasure, and we want it to continue. So the first recommendation, is an expression of thanks that should be minuted. Now, the second recommendations to do with our communications team, and Neil is fantastic at sort of getting the correct pithy wording. This is not my strength, okay? So the recommendation is along the lines of, that we encourage our communications team, to explore all opportunities, to improve communications on matters such as, the priority service, the report a problem online, and sources of help, that are available for our residents, who might be have issues, relating to water. So it's a recommendation to our communications team. The third recommendation is that we recommend that our officers engage with Thames Water to gather a little bit more information, about Schedule 3, okay, and to explore, if there's any opportunity, positive opportunity here, to lobby government, including our local MPs, in a way that might be beneficial, for our residents. So that's the third recommendation. The fourth recommendation is one that Alison suggested, that we would request that WBC explore opportunity, the practicalities, okay, of providing assistance during times when vulnerable, customers, might be in urgent need. Are you happy with? Have I got the gist of that, Alison? Yeah. Okay. Fine. Good. And the final recommendation from Adrian, okay, is that we would encourage the relevant executive members and council officers to explore through the local plan update, including some of the supplementary planning documents, matters relating to reducing or managing better, demand for our water resources. I hope that's captured the gist of that. I think we're going to have to rely on Neil, okay, for getting the pithy wording. So they're the 5 recommendations.
Okay, that sounds very good. Does anyone disagree with that?
Proposer?
Are we happy to put those recommendations? Oh, Chris. Yeah, well, you're voting. Well, okay. Well, can have a vote.
Seconder? We need a seconder.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Pauline? Yep.
Would you like to vote on those recommendations?
Yeah.
Very good. Good. Thank you very much. So anyway, thank you, Richard, and
thank you for the invitation.
For coming. Thank you very much. Yeah. Agenda item 62, the leader and chief executive. Stephen, pass over to Stephen.
Thank you very much. After the very long and interesting conversation you've just had with Richard and Nikki, I'm not sure that this is going to be anything other than an anticlimax, but we're here really to report to you on progress on the council over the last period since we last reported to you, an update on the matters that we're trying to deal with and some of the things that we've managed to achieve. The first page of the report, which is in your agenda, I'm not going to take you through everything because I'm making the radical assumption you've actually read it. You can see the challenges remain broadly similar to the ones that you're by now, I'm sure, very familiar with. We know about financial pressures. We know about the cost of living crisis. We know that it's challenging to establish good and productive partnership arrangements. And we know that there is an enormous increase in demand for and the cost of providing some of our services, particularly at adults and children's and housing, where there is considerable pressure. We've also, you can see on that first page, some of the things we're trying to do to try and address these challenges. I want to spend a bit more time, if I may. I don't know whether Susan wants to add anything to that first page.
Maybe if I can add some points to that, so just to sort of dig a little bit deeper with regards to those challenges. We're still feeling the effects of inflation. So that is in the areas of costs of care, in the areas of placements for our children and young people, and also in the cost of emergency accommodation in terms of in the event of homelessness. So that the inflation is still actually having an impact. And the type of things that we're actually undertaking to address those increased costs, for example, is around actually purchasing specialist accommodation. So that's why you'll have seen a reference to buying a care home or buying a children's home as well. So we're taking actions to actually reduce the impact of the inflation. As Stephen has talked about, in terms of the cost of living crisis and the impact on our communities, it's very practical action as well that we're taking in terms of the school uniform project that's mentioned. I think it's it's really important that we help families to with their children to ensure they're school ready, and they feel sort of confident about that. So I think that's those real practical projects are really important. And in terms of the partnership relationship point, I think that I just wanted to make a point more detail around some of the projects that we've been doing this year have had an impact, such as Safety Valve. That work that we've been doing in Safety Valve has meant us doing more work with the likes of schools. At the same time, the challenges around school places meant a lot of work with our schools and our head teachers as well. And I think thinking about partnership, if I think about the police, I mean, the borough commander came to the last council meeting and talked about the partnership work that we've been doing, and so that's again real examples of work which have had an impact on our local communities. And when he talked about the closure of some of the some flats in some of our communities that have been hosting drug dealing, that I think those are real examples where we're taking a real positive impact and working really much more closely on the neighbourhood level, which we can build on more and more. And finally, just on that slide, I think what for us is this the demand, so that and that complexity of demand point is around the likes of children's services, where we've got a lot more cases that actually have mental health issues, for example, and we've got greater demand for our EHCPs. And so what's really important is that we're working on that early intervention, we're working on prevention, so we are actually doing that. So I just want to add a few points there.
Yeah, and on that final point, it's worth adding, of course, that unfortunately the calculation that the government makes about how it what level of service support it gives us doesn't really take account of these complex and expensive children's services cases. It is based almost entirely on indices of deprivation, and obviously on those Wokingham scores pretty low, which means that we're always destined, under the current way of calculating the amount of money the government should give us, we're always destined to come pretty low down on the list, if not at the bottom. So clearly, one thing that would help us in the long run and would help these young people who have got really complex and very expensive needs that we have to help provide, one thing that would help us enormously is a change in the method by which this distribution of money was made. I want to go on to the second slide. This is an area that's new. I don't think we've reported to you formally on this yet, and this is the new strategic partnership that we've forged with Reading University. On a personal note, I'd say this has long been one of my ambitions, that we take greater advantage of having a world-class university, at least partly in the borough. In fact, it's mainly in the borough. And I mainly in the borough. Only a bit of it's in actually Reading. And it's really pleasing to me that we've been able to forge this partnership, and we are going to be able to gain, I think, a lot from it, because we're able to call on the expertise of the university and help us with things like climate, environmental sustainability. They have world-class expertise in this area, which we can call on. They're giving us good help with arts, heritage and culture, economic development and growth. Obviously, the university is home to the science park, which is now becoming a major area of employment, particularly in the creative industries. And then finally, and this is the one that may mystify you most, participatory action research. This is about how you empower local communities to do the research into problems that they identify as in need of addressing in their communities. So it's about empowering people to actually undertake research that will help find solutions to problems. It's quite an exciting area of academic work that could have direct impact on the way we tackle problems in communities. From the university, I mean, what we get out of this is pretty obvious. We get world-class academic help. What they get out of it might be mysterious to you, but they get a lot out of it too, because university funding does crucially, applying for funding from external sources does rely crucially on being able to demonstrate what in academic language is called impact. And impact means showing that the research done in the ivory tower of academia has a direct impact on the wider community. And in terms of impact scoring, nothing counts higher than working with local councils and communities and seeing the way in which your research feeds into policy formulation and action. So they get something out of it and we get something out of it, which of course is the basis of most productive partnerships. So that's a really, to me, a piece of extremely good news that is, I hope, going to help the council for years and years to come. I don't know if Pauline's indicated she wants to say something. Do you want to say something now, Pauline? Yeah. Yeah. So I don't mind if you want to. I'm happy for you to come in now.
I was talking to Susan last week and had a suggestion that we use some of the university researchers to try and help us with some of the more complex modelling, like education demand, which we don't have the specialists to do, but they probably do have people that have the right expertise. It's not directly in here because it's not a direct thing that they know about, like climate or whatever, but I think that's something that's worth following up.
Yeah, I think it is related to the economic development and growth work stream, but I think that's a brilliant suggestion and thank you very much. I think that will be very helpful.
And in particular, I mean, we were talking as an example around around the home to school transport, wasn't it? And about sort of like the modelling around that, because that is particular pressure. So I agree. Yeah, absolutely. That is should we do that?
To be fair, we've chosen 4 work streams because we are aware that there could be much more that we could work together on, but we have to get started, and we wanted to get started in a manageable way. So there are lead academics for each of these work streams, identified senior officers for them as well. But that's a really helpful suggestion. Thank you, Pauline.
Yeah, it wasn't just transport, it was also the actual demand. We seem to be quite poor at working out what the demand's going to be, and maybe they could help with that.
Yeah, they will have good methods of modelling, which may be an improvement on ours. I mean, it's a challenging area, as you can imagine, with all sorts of variables to take into account, but that's really helpful. Thank you. And that's a kind of indication of how much we could stand to get out of this relationship. The next page is, I don't know if there's anything you want to add on the university. I think I've done it.
Sorry if that's right, I've interrupted because you're talking about university. About 4 years ago, Early Town Council reached out to a university to help us write our climate action plan. Didn't come to anything. Do you think there'll be now more forthcoming with this partnership to try again? Or could Early Town work with you as well?
I think it would be probably wise to avoid duplicating effort. So if you can work with us, I think that would be better than you're separately making an ask to the university. I think you're less likely to get anywhere if they feel they're doing the work for us and you're asking for them to do a different piece of work. It may be that they can help both of us, but they're probably going to want a coordinated approach to this.
Thank you. So can I be in touch with you at some point?
You can at any point.
Well, thank you, but on that topic. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So on the next slide, we've got something more familiar to you, the community vision and the work we're doing on the community vision. We are at the point where we've now gone out to wider public consultation on our the themes and the questions we've asked. We are now analysing the results. There's been a really big push to get lots of people involved, and that's broadly been successful. We've got some good engagement with community groups, and crucially, we've been able to engage with young people to a greater extent than we had earlier in the process. After all, the community vision ultimately is important in terms of what young people think of it and what they feel it's offering them. So the work continues on that, and we hope during 2024 to bring that to a conclusion. On the following page, page 21, there's really just a snapshot of some of the things that have been achieved. It's worth perhaps just looking at the first and the last. Care home purchase to support vulnerable residents and children welcome to the new SEND Early Years Centre at Farley Hill. Both of those are united by a theme that Susan touched on earlier on, which is investing to save. These are really big and serious and important investment to save initiatives. By purchasing care home provision, we are protecting ourselves against really quite significant costs down the road that we could face with care caps. And then in the case of building new SEND schools or expanding SEND provision, we're obviously in the position to try and reduce the very high costs associated with home to school transport, the vast majority of which, the increase in which does come in SEND provision. So these are good examples of invest to save initiatives which will help the council, help our residents, and actually save money. Susan, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just want to add some other examples, a couple which relate to quality of life. So one in July, we had an award for some accommodation that was built for adults with learning disabilities, and it's great. Obviously, it's fantastic for the accommodation in itself and the impact it has on adults' quality of life, and at the same time, really good to be recognised nationally for that. And similarly with the tenant and landlord panel, that was that received an award, but again, it's how we work, and I use that collectively because I know it's councillors from across the parties that actually are on that panel. So I think that's a really fantastic panel that we have in the borough that's been nationally recognised. And I just finally, and just to say on the adult services side of things, there have been some what are called ASCOF measures, and Wokingham is top in the country for getting adults with learning disabilities into work. So that's something that came out in December. So some really sort of positive work that's taking place in terms of impacting on people's quality of life.
Yeah, thank you. If we move on to the next page, page 22 of your agenda, this is an example really of a comms campaign, which I think is really a very, very good one. It's partially an attempt to present the council with a human face, but it's mainly, I think, about trying to explain to our residents what council services do for vulnerable people in our community, the difference that's made by council officers. So we can't focus on the individuals receiving the benefit. That would be really quite problematic, but we can focus on the people who are delivering the benefit. And this comms campaign, which is focusing on council officers and telling their stories about what they do to help people in our community, I think is really quite inspired, and I think a very good thing. The next steps, which is the final page of this report, is doesn't need to be really dwelt on for too long. It's we continue, of course, to focus primarily on establishing a safe financial position, not just for this coming year, but for the future, which is why some of these longer term invest to save initiatives, which are costly now, are really important. We have to think long term. We have to think about the long term sustainability of this organisation and its finances. That's partly why, of course, from my perspective, I know this is not a view universally shared in the room, but from my perspective, partnership working is also important. We have to be prepared in conditions where I cannot envisage finances of local government becoming magically transformed for the better, even with a different government. I think we have to accept that we have to find innovative ways of making our money go further, and we have to work in collaboration and alongside partners to try and ensure that we can deliver for our residents. So that's all I wanted to say on this. Do you want to add anything? Nope. Okay.
Okay, thank you both very much.
And Andy has a question.
Should we open it up to questions? Andy.
Thank you, and thank you both for coming along. So just about the university, apart from the obvious wrong name that the university has, in some parts of the borough, the university is not very popular. I'm thinking about Shinfield. And are we not worried that there is a risk of some sort of reputational damage to us by too close an association with an organisation that is seen, frankly, as like a rapacious landowner whose main concern is selling off farmland to plonk, for example, 5,000 houses down where nobody local wants them, and that in people's minds there is a link up between the planning permissions, etc., that are being done and this sort of arrangement.
Too close to the relationship. Yeah, no, I understand exactly where you're coming from, and that view has, of course, been articulated by some people. I view it, unsurprisingly, very differently. I think part of the problem is the university is only featured on our radar as a predatory landowner, and that has inhibited us from actually recognising the benefits we could get from working collaboratively with the university. That does not mean that for purposes of the planning process, we won't engage with the university in a very different way. We will, because this has nothing to do with the university as a landowner and its ambitions as a landowner. We have to keep those completely separate from this piece of work. But it would be, to me, a massive missed opportunity if we allowed those inhibitions about the university as landowner and developer to get in the way of getting the benefit for our community of working with the university. So, just thinking about how some of this will benefit people in our borough, if we don't grasp that opportunity, I would feel that we'd missed a really golden opportunity. So I am aware of your concern, or rather the concern that's been expressed by others, and I interestingly took legal advice from Andrew Moulton about how this would fit in negotiating with the university on some of its land holdings, about planning and working in a strategic partnership in other areas. And the chief monitoring officer's advice was that this was fine. There was no conflict of interest.
If I can just add to that, in terms of if we look up and down the country and talking to my colleagues in different councils, then they are taking the same approach in terms of working with universities. It is a challenge because universities in different parts of the country are seen in a similar way in terms of landowners. But it's a greater benefit, a greater good to actually engage and work together, but absolutely recognise exactly what you're saying. But the important thing is, I think, to work in partnership.
Yeah.
Overall.
Yeah. Okay, Andy. Yeah.
And this is drilling down right to a very, very small thing. You mentioned the houses that have been closed down by the police, and they're working with us. And I think all three of them were on the noise stand. I think I passed all three of them at the weekend at various times. And what struck me was is there a way in which any sort of partnership between, and I think it would be us, can actually do something to stop making these places still look like drug dens, because they're boarded up, they've got a police notice on the front, the gardens are shambled, and they just look like they're waiting for the next drug dealer to move in. Now, I suspect it depends on if the council properties are private or whatever, but there must be a finishing of that story, if you like, to make those properties fit in with the decent folk around them.
Yeah, I think Susan wants to come back.
I think you're absolutely right, Andy, on that. We absolutely should act on that, because anything unkempt in that way, and people know the background and history to it, it just doesn't help. So I think, let me take that one away, but you're absolutely right to raise that.
Okay, Caroline.
Thank you. On challenges, you mentioned inconsistencies with partnerships. Have you managed to find out why? Are you finding opportunities with other people to cover the shortfall, or are you going back to them and saying we've got a different offer?
No, I think what this really alludes to is that some of the partnership working that we have is working more smoothly than others. I think it's not a secret that the partnership is the hardest to progress is with town and parish councils. And that's, I think, quite simply because there is a legacy of distrust, a really quite long and deep legacy of distrust, which it is very hard to overcome. And however much you try to say that we want to start with a clean slate and move forward, there are some people who want constantly to bring back what's happened in the past as evidence of a lack of confidence that things have changed. And it's quite a difficult it's a difficult argument to overcome, because essentially people are saying, well, it went wrong then. How do we know it's not going to go wrong now? Well, you can't say or prove anything that will make them no longer suspicious or distrustful. So it's a challenge, but I think we are making some progress. We are working very constructively with some towns and parishes, and I think we will be continuing to do the work to try and win the confidence and win the trust of those who have still not quite got there. But it's like all partnership working. I'm afraid it does require a lot of work, a lot of effort. And like all relationships, you don't just have to establish them, you have to maintain them. And those are the challenges.
Thank you.
Okay, Andrew.
I think Pauline's. Oh.
Thank you. The interesting thing about the relationship with town and parish councils, in my view, is that it's got nothing to do with politics either. I mean, you can have difficult relationships with town and parish councils that are actually controlled by the same party as well. It's more to do, I think, with unaligned objectives. And we had terrible trouble on early town council with properties in Wokingham because they had, or it was leisure services as well, because they had conflicting objectives and they didn't understand our point of view. I think most of it's to do with aligned objectives and being clear on each other's points of view, which aren't always the same. I don't really think it's got much to do with politics. I think it's about conflicts of objective and conflicts of where you're trying to get to.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I think we have to acknowledge there have been some problems with personalities in the past, but there have also primarily been these problems of a lack of alignment of priorities and objectives. And I think, one of the ways in which you have to move forward with partnership working is recognizing that you won't always agree. It's not necessary to agree on everything for a partnership to work. There can be room for divergent views. There can be room for differences, as there are in all relationships. But I think your analysis is correct.
Andrew?
Thanks, Al. Two questions, if I may. The first one is about the community vision, and I'd be really interested if you could just very briefly summarise the next steps after the community vision is published, and in particular, what sort of oversight will there be of the community vision, including involvement of the partners, in that vision, in that vision.
Well, the community vision. Effectively writing and getting approval for a community vision is merely the start of the process. From the council's point of view, the community vision will inform our own plan, our council plan. You will recall there's going to be a bridging council plan that really extends the current one for a year to enable this to come to fruition and then fully inform the next council plan that we will be producing once this community vision work is complete to the extent we have the document that contains the aspirations. But that, from the community vision point of view, is not the end of the story. We will be keeping the partnership, the steering group in being, because we do need to oversee progress with it and the way it actually feeds through into the council's plan. But we also need to make sure that it's refreshed. What the community vision is now may not be the same as the community vision in 3 or 4 years' time. So we do need to have mechanisms for refreshing. And we also need to have mechanisms, I think, for engaging with the wider community on, whether this is working or whether they think there needs to be any tweaks or changes. So it's in that sense will be a living document, not a tablets of stone.
I think that's really helpful. And the second question, if I may, is you talked about funding and the challenges. One of the challenges around funding to do with the increase, not only increasing demand, but increasing complexity of demand, particularly in adult
and cost of delivering.
And cost, yes. And you said that these the funding challenges from Westminster, are likely to continue. So this raises some real concerns, about sustainability. Now, I've got a question about sort of what action we are taking, particularly in terms of sort of lobbying or joining with other lobbying groups. I believe, that we are part of the F40 Fair Funding group, which relates specifically to SEND. So I'm not so much concerned about that, but in the back of my mind, and I haven't been able to actually sort of find any information about this, I recollect, I think, that there was some discussion about some other form of fair funding campaign. It may have been related to the local government authority or something else. I don't know. I'm just wondering, if we have been part of such processes, and if so, what's the status of them?
I think the challenge here is that the current dispensation, which focuses on indices of deprivation, inevitably means the money gets distributed in a certain way. And while we are losers by that system, others are winners. So we cannot expect every council in the land to agree with the need to change the way the money is distributed, because some will end up losing out by that, even if it's only a relatively modest modification that takes some account of the costs of delivering adults and children's services, for instance. And what we're asking for really is just a recalibration. We're not asking for a wholesale transfer of all the funds that currently go to authorities that have high levels of deprivation. That would be wrong. That would be completely unfair. It is right and proper that most of the money supports those councils that have problems, really quite deep social problems, and really high levels of poverty and deprivation. But what we are hoping for and what we want to do is find common cause with councils in a similar situation, and there are a significant number, to try and recalibrate the calculation so that there is some greater emphasis given to the challenges of meeting increasingly complex, increasingly expensive social care costs.
Could I come in on the back of what Stephen said to help with the answer? Stephen's absolutely right in that you have to find your natural allies. There's no point for us, for example, being in the same club as, say, Blackpool, that's at the complete other extreme of the funding spectrum. And it's also important so it's those facing the same challenges, which is, in our case, the fact that affluence is not recognised as a driver of need. And if you look at the distribution of EHCPs, cost of waste, even learning disabilities, many of these things are driven by, say, career, families, affluence and disposable income, all those types of things. That's not recognised at all in the formula. It's the only thing really recognised is deprivation. And that really harms Wokingham because we're seen to be the least deprived of all unitary authorities in the country. So we have to find those common allies. The other thing we need to do as well is come in on the back of something that has credibility in the community. And a really good example of this is the University of Kent undertook a review of social care needs, which become much more sophisticated than the blunt instrument that's been used previously. And so, and that was, I think, seen as with, obviously it's from the university, they were the leading researchers in this area. And that actually would give Wokingham Borough Council £11 million more money than the current formula, just for adult social care. So it's a beautiful demonstration of something that was out there. It was actually produced in 2015. It's out there. It has credibility, both at government level and in parts of the local government community. And of course, it's finding those authorities that need to get the likes of these formulas out there into the new local government finance settlement. So Stephen's absolutely right. It's both the allies, but also jumping on something that already has credibility rather than us saying, oh, we've done a calculation. Can you just make the figures work in that way just for Wokingham? That'll go nowhere. So I think it's those two. And the other thing is timing as well. And I think the timing starts about now, or, well, actually, it'll be good to know nationally what the government position is. Understanding, though, you know, the places to come in at government level and the timing to make sure there won't be a new local government finance settlement from before 26, 27. So we've got a little bit of time. So we don't want to go too early, but we don't want to go, you know, we don't want to miss the window either. Sorry, that was a long extension to Stephen's.
Thank you.
Pauline?
Thank you. I think you're right. I think we need to, some of what Graham said, actually. I think you need to be tangible. We are one of the, in terms of spending power, we are one of the highest in this area. Not the highest, but I think second. But we also have demand that is driven by things that mean that we have high costs. And I think you need to make that argument. It doesn't need to be a, oh, we're terrible, you know, it doesn't need to be a very high level argument yelling about stuff. It needs to be really tangible and detailed about specific issues with specific evidence. Now, yesterday I was asked by John Redwood to give some information because he was going to talk to the social care minister. So Matt's very kindly provided me with some to try and feed back exactly the point that Graham's made on a specific problem. And I think that's the way you get traction. I remember the debate, and I think it was when Theresa May was Prime Minister. There was a debate in the House of Commons about changing the formula. And it was so entrenched into Labour MPs saying, no way are we changing our formula, you know, it's all about poverty. And Conservative MPs saying, oh, we've got a lot of costs, we've got to have a different formula. And it wasn't going to get anywhere. And I can't remember exactly when it was, but I remember listening to the debate. It needs to be a more nuanced debate based on evidence rather than something based on trenches and bricks and, you know, ammunition being thrown backwards and forwards. And I think those individual cases are really, really useful. And when you've got an individual case, let's lobby all the MPs and provide that bit of evidence rather than some sort of generic, oh, we're terribly badly funded, which is just going to bounce off.
Well, I think that's correct. We do need to make it an evidence-based case, and I think we've got plenty of evidence to enable us to do that.
I think it needs to be taken one bite at a time. You know, you need evidence about particular issues, try and solve it one bit at a time. I mean, you've made great progress on the school funding thing through the review that's been going on. It's picking off specific issues. If you have a generic question or a generic argument, you're likely to lose the whole thing. That's just my opinion. You might not agree. I mean, Susan might have a view.
So in terms of, I agree with you about specifics, absolutely, because human, you know, almost human stories, that and a story about the impact, I think that does really matter because people can really relate to that. So yeah, absolutely.
So, specifics, yes, fine. But I would say, and of course they do gain traction much more readily, but under a major funding formula review, we need to try our best to shift the paradigm from need and money is purely driven by deprivation to actually it's also driven by affluence. And until we win that argument, yes, and absolutely right, and the basic cost of providing services. And if we fail to win that argument, Wokingham will invariably sit at the bottom of the pecking order as a perceived well-off local authority that doesn't need funding.
Chris?
Thanks. Take the conversation slightly differently in that I'm looking at the community vision, the partnerships, etc. And I'm wondering about the wider partnerships with local councils, with our neighbours, because the boundaries of communities don't end just because you're in Wokingham or you're in Reading. They stretch beyond there, and the needs of the communities and the businesses do coalesce at times. So I'm looking at questions along the lines of, do we involve conversations with councils for argument's sake, discounting volume? Do we buy services and talk to each other about the services that we're demanding or requiring to see whether or not there is this opportunity to make a savings for ourselves as well as for others? The same as the problems that we have.
To try and answer that one,
please,
Chris, because I'm pleased to say I have got an answer to that one. And it comes in kind of two levels, really. And it's less about the community vision and more about other forms of partnership working. But in terms of the community vision, I did go to an event which actually took place in the University of Reading, but it wasn't organised by the university. They were merely the hosts. It was organised by Reading Citizens. And Reading Citizens was basically an agglomeration of civil society groups who were all coming forward with their asks of local government in their area. And it was really interesting that they've set up a Reading Citizens panel or jury, and I spoke at it, and Jason Brock from Reading spoke at it. And it did make me think that we could do something along those similar lines ourselves at some stage in the future. The other part of the answer is on a different level and probably more directly relevant to what you're asking. We have regular meetings of the Berkshire leaders. Once a month, the Berkshire leaders meet, and it's a forum for trying to find areas of common interest and cross-boundary cooperation. We're actually, yesterday, we met yesterday, and apparently Wokingham is chairing the Berkshire leaders, and we agreed yesterday to endorse a kind of set of papers which will be taken to all councils, all 6 councils, which will be the back foundation for the formation of a Berkshire Prosperity Board, which will be a means by which all of the councils or conglomerations of councils within that group, but not necessarily all of them, would be able to bid for funding for cross-boundary projects, potentially big infrastructure projects. It will enhance greatly the opportunities of success in those bidding exercises, because if you bid as a single council, your chance of success are quite low. If you bid as a partnership of councils, your chance of success is higher. So there's we will be in February, in fact, I think it'll be at the budget council meeting, we will have a report coming to this council. All the other councils in Berkshire having reports going to their full councils at around the same time, asking them to endorse the establishment of this Berkshire Prosperity Board. And it is a really tangible way in which we're trying to deliver just the kind of cross-boundary cooperation that you're talking about. Because as you quite rightly say, problems don't usually halt at council boundaries.
Just maybe I just add to that. So just in terms of how we work as local authorities, to give you some examples, for example, if I think about audit, we as a council provide services to other councils, so that actually, we get an income from that. And, we're seen as a council that really provide that good service in that regards. If I think about legal cases with regards to adults and children's, that's actually hosted by Reading, and that provides a service to all of the councils in Berkshire. And I just want to give you a third example, is that we've got our own Director of Public Health now. However, it's really important that that director works across West Berkshire and across Berkshire as a whole to see where we can sort of join things up, which they do. So we work in different ways to actually get efficiencies and effectiveness. It's just that one size doesn't fit all, if you know what I mean. We actually look to work to see where things are going to work best for us. So we had the service that was run by West Berks a number of years ago, and we took that in-house, and that was around antisocial behaviour, and that was because we felt it would work better if it was an in-house, and we could be more effective in-house. So it's just really thinking about those different opportunities.
Sorry, just more an observation rather than a question, is that I subbed on the children's ONS the other day, and that brought it home to me how difficult a topic, how challenging a topic it is to deal with for the community. And it does bring home to me that not all deprived children are in need of care, but all children in care live in deprived environments. And we really do have to get the government to give us a better balance.
Mm. Well, I'm not going to dissent from that now.
Okay, Andy.
Okay, so there's two really. Talking about the formula, and what we see, because we are one of the most prosperous boroughs in the country by any measure, and also one of the most educated boroughs in the country, with I think a far higher proportion of people with A levels and degrees than almost any other area. So what we seem to be saying is that those two things are driving demand for special educational needs in particular, and that's driving up our costs. So we need a formula which reflects that demand is driven by the nature almost of the population. What I'm not sure about is, are we saying that children of those families are more likely to have special educational needs, or are we saying that children in those families are more likely to have parents who recognise the signs of special educational needs and are likely to be much more pushy with the local authority in getting those needs assessed? Meanwhile, in very, very deprived areas where parents don't recognise the signs, are we saying that parents don't recognise the signs, or just that kids from those families just don't develop special education needs? Because if we're going to government and we're saying, basically saying our middle class parents are very, very pushy and that's driving up demand, if I can work that out in a couple of minutes, I would imagine that a future government is also going to be thinking, well, actually, perhaps we should be spending our money on identifying demand in areas where it currently isn't identified, because that would be the most equitable solution if you're a new government. That's the first one. So do you want to look at that one first?
Do you want to start? I'll jump in if I can or should.
I don't think it needs to be as complicated as that. It can be on just introduce EHCPs, for example, into the formula. It's not there. So it's about having a more sophisticated level of measuring. And it's also number of learning disabilities or what have you, or trips that have to be made, homeschooled. But they're more sophisticated measurements. They're not about saying making the assumption, you know, because it wouldn't be really for us to determine what the particular drivers are. But the point is, the local authority that is apparently very affluent and has very little need actually has high need. So if we start, I guess, to Pauline's point, look at what the actual costs are, will be a big step forward, rather than the assumption we have no need and no cost because we're affluent.
I don't know if that relates to the second part of the question or not, but Pauline mentioned, and she asked you, and I wasn't sure if you'd answered it, that Pauline said that we have one of the highest, I think you used the word core spending.
It's the measure.
Yours is still on.
It's the measure of spending power published by the government, which includes government grant, new homes bonus, and council tax. So it's the revenue per head for the council, not the revenue from the government, but the total revenue. So it's not the same as the grant, to be clear.
So you're saying that we have one of the highest in the country?
No, I'm saying in the area. So it was Berkshire I was looking at, I think.
I think it might be helpful if Graham came back on that.
Yes. What Pauline's talking about is core spending power, which is effectively the income that comes into the organisation. And if you spend all that income, that's your expenditure. So if you equate income equals expenditure, not exactly that, but say you did. Another way is looking at your budget requirement, which is our council tax, which is our net expenditure. So the two should be pretty close. They're not exactly the same. When I've looked at our net, and then you make it per head of population to make it comparable, I think ours was third, but Pauline's right in saying it's not right at the bottom in the way that our grant is. Well, it's third in Berkshire. It's not a national thing. So I think it's, in terms of spending per head, we're nearer average, I would say, across the country. And we're third in Berkshire, so that makes us about average at 6. But I guess the point is, we do, because of the amount of council tax we bring in, we add it to our grant, which therefore increases the amount we spend per head, which looks different when you look at the amount of grant we receive per head, which puts us right at the bottom of the stack.
So we have a very good a very good council tax base, in effect, that makes up for the lack of.
In terms of gearing, which means your dependency on council tax, we are the highest unitary authority in the whole of the country. So 1% on council tax means more to us proportionally than any other council in the country when you compare us with any other unitary.
It is worth saying, of course, that the government does cap council tax, so you can be a wealthy area, but council tax is a very blunt instrument for actually tapping into that wealth.
It is, and at this point, I remember that I think on 3 occasions, I think between 2010 and 2016, we froze council tax, and in each of those years we forego, I think, a 2% increase in council tax in exchange for one-off lump sum grants from the government. So although that may have helped people at the time, and also in future years, because it keeps council tax below a level, in effect, we have thrown away £6 million a year of revenue every year, and obviously with the percentage increase in every year. So it just goes to show decisions on makes do catch up with one.
Well, yeah, there are other councils which have got into quite considerable financial difficulties as a result of those decisions made by their predecessors.
Okay.
One recommendation.
And more questions? Okay, one more.
So it's more an add-on comment to or a question to this one, is that I hear the figures being quoted about how much comes in per head, but I don't hear the figure of how much it actually costs to deliver the service per head in this borough. If we look at the pressure, is it the pressure of cost is higher than the income that's being delivered, is my view.
Yeah, I suppose the best way to answer that is to look at the public papers that are going to the overview and scrutiny corporate and community, which shows the challenge we face for next year, the level of savings we've had to identify, which has been pretty tough, about 12.6 million, and then there was still a 5 million deficit after all that. So for sure, we could do without a 17 million pound challenge next year on top of the 11.8 we already had this year, and then there's a further 9 million in the following year. So it's really tough. Obviously, we're not alone as a local authority facing these sorts of challenges, but it does show that the severity of the savings targets are at levels 2-3 times higher than we've ever had to achieve previously.
Just thanks for that, Graham. I just wanted to confirm that I was thinking along the lines of what I'd said before. Thank you.
Okay, so we wrap this up now. So we have one recommendation, Andrew.
I don't know whether the committee wants to consider this as a recommendation, but there was considerable discussion regarding the funding formula, and so you might wish a recommendation along the lines that the committee notes the concerns raised in discussion with respect to the funding formula, and encourages a continuation of the strategic evidence-based approach that the council is taking towards this.
Yeah, might I suggest that we make the point about it being evidence-based, but also I understand Graham's point about at the right point you have to make the holistic argument, but I think at the moment you might have more success with the individual arguments. So it's about making it evidence-based and subject to individual issues rather than some generic statement about it's all a dreadful mess. Yeah.
I was hoping that the phrase the strategic approach that's been described, that includes precisely what you're saying. Okay.
Isn't how I read the word strategic. Strategic to me says, nuclear missiles, not individual shells.
But if I could just come in quickly, the strategy may well be to start with some individual and then go on to the more generic. So that's still strategic.
Yeah, and I don't think it necessarily at the moment that the campaign is on individual subjects. It's very high level from what I see anyway in the press, from the press releases and things. I think it needs to be specific about specific subjects personally. It's just my opinion.
I think if I could respond to that, the minutes will reflect concern. Okay, and we can certainly ensure orally as well, that that concern is expressed, very clearly, to the executive. So, would you be happy with that? Yeah. Should we go? Do we want to make this a recommendation?
So, should we? Would we like to make this recommendation then?
Okay, so proposal.
We have a proposer, Catherine.
Yeah. Seconder.
Seconder.
I will.
Okay, Chris.
Yeah.
Okay.
All those.
So all those in favour of if Andrew could read it.
Okay. So the committee notes the concern, the discussion raised regarding the funding formula, and encourages a continuation of the strategic evidence-based approach that the council is taking.
So I think I'd like to remove the word continuation, because without the word continuation, it allows you to nuance it. With the word continuation, it's a continuation of what we're doing at the moment, which is, oh my God, Woking Borough has no money. Oh my God, Woking Borough has no money. And I think we need to be very specific about the individual instances where we believe the formula is inefficient or unfair.
Sense in English?
Yep.
Sorry, just crossing the word out.
And encourages just simply remove continuation. Yeah. Are you happy with that, Neil? Others? Okay.
Okay.
We need to go to a vote on
we
that.
have a vote on that and propose second.
Yeah.
We'd like to vote. Approve this.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So thank you very much to Stephen, Susan and Gray for that presentation. Thanks. Okay, so now we move on to the Q2 performance monitoring report. I'm not sure who's.
I think I think it looks like Louise,
Stephen, and we have Will.
And Will as well, yes. Will's there, which is very good. And I think Sally's up there somewhere. Yes.
All right.
Sally's there too. Yes, Sally's there too.
Right.
Well, I'm sure they're going to I'm sure answer any detailed questions you've got about these different KPIs. But my task is simply just to say a very few words of introduction. The summary of the report, I should say, relates to what happened in Q2. So you'll notice the second bullet point highlighting some things that happened in Q2. Shortlisting as finalists of Affordable Housing Award in Excellence in Community-Led Decision Making for TLIP. As we've already indicated, we won the award. We were shortlisted in Q2, but I can update you to say we won the award, the top award. So that was a great achievement. I think there's nothing more I want to say other than just try and put in broad context that of all our KPIs, 32 are green, 11 are amber, and 5 are red. So it's worth just reflecting on the fact that overall, those are really rather good scores. We obviously have some red areas that we need to address, but overall, that's actually quite encouraging. But I'm quite happy to open it up to questions because I'm sure there will be questions in this. Sally or Louise or Will want to say anything at this stage?
No, I think that's fine. Thank you, Stephen. You've done the intro perfectly. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just say, just to help proceedings, so Sally's here to assist with the Chief Executive KPI questions. I'm here for resource and assets, and Rhiannon is here for place and growth. And Will and Louise will help with the overall commentary or what have you. Where we get stuck, let's hope we don't. Okay.
Okay, because I mean, as normal, we don't delve into the children's services and the adult services because they're dealt with at the other subcommittees. So we just concentrate on the other zones. So okay, so should we start off then with questions on resources and assets? Has anyone got any questions on? Okay, Caroline.
Sorry, on page 36, you're talking about the rental incomes on properties are doing very well, but do we know are any struggling in the retail sector?
Page 36 says council tax and business rates. Is that what you meant? The very top of page 36. Okay, yes, I see that. That is RA4, which is the occupancy rate WBC owned regeneration units, which shows that this isn't so much about whether an individual business is struggling in its ongoing service delivery. Obviously, it is if it's to the extent that the business goes into liquidation and the unit becomes vacant. What this is showing is that in terms of those legally agreed arrangements with retail tenants, that has positively increased to 97.4%, which is saying it's still an attractive place to come. And despite all the challenges that we've had over the years, COVID, etc., but even in the cost of living crisis, we're managing to achieve such a high level of legal rental. Now, I'll be completely wrong if I told you that everything out there is rosy and all businesses are paying their bills as easily as others, but it is an eclectic mix. Some are doing extremely well, but we deliberately set up the town centre to have small businesses, small local businesses, as well as the nationals. And I'm not suggesting the nationals are immune from the pressures of cost of living and the footfall every day out there, but certainly the small business are more sensitive to that often. So I think overall that's telling us it's an extremely positive picture in the context of great challenges, but there will be stresses that are out there, and we do all we can to support. But of course, that support can't go as far as just giving away free rent and letting that go. We have to obviously cover the cost of our investment and get a return, but often that does maximize or optimize itself through being as supportive and interactive, engaged as we can be in that process, because we find the same is true with council tax collection, which again is can be very challenging. But the more we engage, we discuss, we agree plans, then the better the outcome usually is, rather than taking a basic hard-nosed approach.
Okay, yes, Pauline.
Thank you. I think the thing that's missing from here, or maybe I'm just not noticing it, is the percentage of occupancy that is actually paying rent and rates, and the percentage that is there and maybe only paying business rates or even not paying anything. I'm not the data isn't here, so it's quite. So the measure, from my point of view, of the success of the town centre is partly the income we're getting out of it, because that's what it was set up for, as well as the vibrancy of the town centre. You can't see that from this data, as far as I can see, or maybe I've misunderstood it.
This particular KPI was never intended to give that holistic, rounded view of the town centre regeneration project, but a key indicator within a suite of potential indicators was how well are you filling the units, and that for me was the most critical, because even if you had 100% payment and all businesses were doing great, but you only had them 50% full, then that's not as good as having them 97% full and 10% being in distress, for example. I completely agree with, I appreciate the point. I'm just saying, if we want to do a holistic analysis of town centre regeneration, there's a lot of more complexity can be added, but I think as a single indicator, this is a pretty good one from my perspective, and was very critical in terms of it's not 100% full, and we obviously over the past years it's been the completion of the regeneration. We want to achieve legally 100% occupancy, and then of course once you've got 100% occupancy, you want to realise as much income as you possibly can from those tenants, and they're working the way that I described of, if they're in distress, to what extent can we help them. So I'm not disagreeing, there are other indicators. I just think that out of all of them was probably one of the most significant.
Could fill the town centre by making it all free. So it'd be interesting to have some form of information about, and maybe it's somewhere else, but in some of the reporting, some sort of information about the income and the trend on the income in terms of, you know, the town centre.
Yeah, we could do that. I'll have to think about how best we do that in the most manageable way, to something that can supplement this indicator.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like an extra piece of work, really, doesn't it, to do all that? Sure.
Yes, we will have the data. I just need to think about how it's most easily incorporated in a way that just doesn't then open up another question and then another. So it's about what are those most useful ways to understand the success or otherwise of the regeneration. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and the KPIs, the important thing is that we can compare them between different quarters, isn't it? So we don't want to keep changing what we're measuring. We want to measure the same thing each quarter. But anyway, Andrew.
Thank you. I've got questions about two of the RA KPIs. The first is on page 32. There's a reference under top wins to the 3,229 attendees to prevention services. Now, I know a couple of people, you know, who have benefited enormously. It's been very important, you know, in their lives. So my question is, how is this funded, and is this funding secure?
Think yes, so this is to do with our early intervention prevention services. I believe all of it, if not nearly all of it, is funded through the public health grant. That is certainly secure for the time being, and that's the only assurance I can give you. There's no talk about that grant being reduced or being rolled into the general formula, which was always a potential possibility. I'm not aware, up until a new fairer funding regime, I'm not aware that will change. So it's as assured as I can.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I'm really pleased, you know, to hear that with the caveat. The second question is again going back to the regeneration projects, but residential work, so RA3, and I think it was reported last time that at that time you were expected to appoint a new contractor shortly. I'm wondering, you know, if we can have an update on this. Has there been any further development since, you know, since the report was written, and an indication of any impacts that the delays might be having on costs and on future returns?
Okay, yes, I can give you an update. A contractor has been appointed. Contractor is Osborne's, and they are planned that they'll complete by January 20. I was going to say January 24, but we're there. January 25, but we suspect it will be completed. They want to be done by Christmas this year. So the expectation is that those works will be completed this year. We will have to make a decision about whether that asset is sold or held for income yielding purposes, and that will be a value for money exercise. The impact on the project is, well, it certainly didn't help because it created delays, and then in that delay, we had to tender in piecemeal for various parts, make it wind and watertight, and then come in with the latest. So that wouldn't have been the most cost-effective way of doing it. And of course, the delays led to delays in costs as well. To the best of our knowledge, we believe we will come out of here, this part of the regeneration, about break even. And if we do, I will be extremely pleased with that, given all the challenges and unforeseen circumstances that we encountered.
Thanks for that update.
So if I could just ask a quick question about RA10, I thought you also asked the one about the one that's gone from amber to red. Just to tell us about that.
RA10 is a reflection of the revenue monitoring throughout the year. So that's all of our services funded by the council taxpayer, which showed an overspend, a sizable overspend in forecast overspend in Q1, which increased Q2, and we're going to be reporting the end of December, and it's going to be of a similar magnitude. I suppose the positive is that Q3 isn't showing it's running away further from us. And I think that's a testament to the huge amount of work that's gone on, that's recognised this rising tide and then has jumped on that and done everything they can. Not they couldn't jump on a rising tide, I suppose, but anyway, surfed on it. So anyway, to do everything humanly possible to contain that increase. So for sure, it's a concern, and it's a sizable figure. I think it's about £3.6 million as a forecast. We will do all we can to bring that down, or at least contain it, prevent it from getting worse. And of course, this pressure, any pressure that isn't dealt with, flows into the following year, and therefore is reflected in your 24-25 budget position that you see at the overview and scrutiny community and corporate will see. And so this sits wholly in line with the leaders and chief exec's presentation of these financial challenges are there. They're very severe. They're not going away. And although it might look on the face of it, it's just a number and it's staying about the same, but the huge amount of work that's going in around the council to keep on top of that and stop it getting worse is immense.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else wants to ask a question about resources and assets? No? Okay, so we move on to next one is place and growth. So anyone got any questions about place and growth? Andrew has.
Yeah, it's not really a question, but it's just going back to some where are we getting an echo? Should we try that? Perfect. Well done, Norman. Thank you. Okay. So it's just going back to a comment that I made when Thames Water were here earlier. I was really interested to see under PG14 or reference under PG14 to street permit works and the very high figures, of street permit works that are exceeding their permit and date times. I know that this is a real concern, for a lot of our residents. It should be a concern also for environmental, and many other reasons. I note the target is to try to have 70% of these completed, within the agreed timings. Okay, so I'm just wondering what's going on there, because are we being unrealistic, in the amount of time that's actually being allocated within these permits? If they're not, if they're not sort of realistic and so forth, perhaps that's sending the wrong kinds of messages, to the utilities and so forth. So just like a little bit sort of discussion on that one.
Okay, just to say that I'm probably not the best person to have the discussion with, because I'm just covering at this stage for George, but I think it's perhaps something that we could take away and come back with a response on that. Would that be okay?
That's okay with me. With the other members of the committee? Yeah, thanks. To turn her mic off.
So yeah, sorry, you turn your mic off because we were getting an echo in the chamber. Thanks.
Anyone else on please?
Sorry, Susan, do you want to say something? No. Oh, sorry, Caroline.
Sorry, it's just a quick one on recorded crime. We have the recorded crime, it's going down, but do we ever get the figures about?
Which page are we on?
We're on page 42, so we're on PG9, and then there's the service narrative on page 49. Do we get any figures about clear-up rates? Because they're doing extra work in it. Are we getting better at the police at clearing up the crimes, particularly shoplifting, which is, I understand, is on the increase? Thank you.
Yeah, we know that the increases are in certain areas, which is around shoplifting and also car thefts. And we're working very closely with our partners, with the police. But we can ask, again, I can take that away and ask to see what our clear up rates are looking like and report back to the group on that.
So in terms of crime performance, is it possible to turn that? Yeah, it's done. Okay. So in terms of crime performance, we've got the community safety partnership as well. So the borough commander actually attends that and answers questions on the crime performance and how the police actually perform. And I mean, obviously the council plays a part in terms of how to tackle crime issues as well. But certainly that's an avenue is the community safety partnership for us to ensure that we get the clear up rates there as well.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just going to add to the end that I understand that it's usually just one or two people. So if we can catch them and
It varies, Caroline. I brought up all of these particular kinds of crime with the police and crime commissioner in a recent meeting, and he really told me some fairly horrifying stories about industrial scale shoplifting operations. So this isn't just one or two individuals, I'm afraid. It's much more organized than that. Yeah.
So any more on place and growth? I was just going to ask about, we've split out a PG13A, which is on status red. So that this is a split away from PG13, and it's seems to identify where the delays are in highways responses.
Again, I'm going to have to take that one away. I know that we're working with Volker Highways at the moment to try and reduce the backlog that we've got. But I think either one of my colleagues needs to step in or I'll come back on that. But also I need to apologise for causing so much disruption on the microphone as well. So I'll just turn that off again.
Right. Chris.
Yeah, just on this same topic, would that not reflect the weather conditions more than anything? The highways can't always complete everything 24 hours a day for the simple reason the weather doesn't allow them to. So we've had a very wet year this year, last year, and it's not stopped. And I do feel that they are hampered a bit by the weather conditions to be able to complete their tasks. So it's whether or not there's some measure that can be applied to this to indicate whether or not that it's been outside of their control rather than their responsibility for failing to deliver.
It was actually a question on 13A. I was just wondering where you were measuring from and to about the delay, where the delay is happening, because the ticket gets raised by the resident, it then gets reviewed by highways, it then gets sent to Volkers. If you're going to bring back the stats, Rhiannon, could you show us where the delay is in the process as well, please?
Yeah, will do.
Thanks.
Again, if I could just answer the point that Chris made, then I think that some of this we need to put a bit more narrative around it about what it actually means and about what as you're sort of alluding to there, what might have affected performance at different points. Because just because it's at a certain level, it's what does it mean for the outcome? What does it mean for residents? And I think that some of it we do need to just think we could put some more narrative in there. So thank you.
Although I'm not sure it can be the weather, because Q1 and Q2 are both well below target, and it's responsible in 28 days, and it didn't rain for the whole of Q1 and Q2 to mean that nothing could be done in 28 days. So there's something more to it than that, I think, Chris. Because the 24-hour response is actually quite good.
It is a new KPI, isn't it? So perhaps it needs some bedding in. Sure. Yeah. How they're stripping this out. Okay. Andrew, you want to say something?
Yeah, just a comment following on from Susan's sort of observation. In this instance, okay, the narrative relating to 13A is actually 2 pages ahead, and just a simple sort of layout, Meta. Perhaps if the narrative for each table could appear immediately underneath, that table. It's a small point, but it might, have helped understanding better. So.
Okay, so moving on to the Chief Executive's office. So have we got any questions on the Chief Executive's office? Nope. No.
Okay, it's adult services and children's services.
So yeah, well, we're going to do adult services rather than children's services.
Yes.
Unless there's something anyone particularly wants to say. Sorry, on the CEO.
Yes, CEX4. I was a bit concerned that the satisfaction with the website seems to be going down when we just relaunched it. If I've read this right.
Yeah, do you want me to take that one, Chair? So Pauline, as you know, replacing a website of a size and complexity of a council website is kind of once in a career type. Well, it certainly has been for me. We had thousands of pages of content to move and multiple integrations to recreate. And I'm personally hugely proud of the way that the team have been able to do that seamlessly for our community and our workforce. For us, what we did, we agreed that we would do a soft launch at the end of June, kind of early July. And we actively promoted that feedback through the kind of smiley faces that you've seen on the website. In fact, Pauline, I think you gave us personally a number of areas of opportunity to enhance where we had things like broken links, etc. So that kind of downturn was where we were getting that feedback around perhaps where we'd kind of taken such a monumental task. So I think it's our first website replacement in over 15 years, getting that feedback to do that continuous improvement. So that was the impact during Q2. And I'm also pleased to say that I don't want to spoil Q3, but we have seen that uptick increase back to the levels that we would expect. So it was that period of introducing a new website for the organisation, which I would hope that members in the room would agree that it's a huge improvement on what we've had previously. And it was the start of what is continuing to be that kind of continuous improvement journey for our digital platform for, as I said, the community and the workforce.
Okay, so we weren't going to particularly touch on children's service and adult service, but if anyone's got any particular questions on those they want to raise, no, that's good. I've just got one here. It's just a general point on AS4 on a page number I haven't put down. AS4. Yeah, sorry. On AS4, it's just a small point, but in fact, that's gone from red to amber, so that's actually something that we should be not making it. That's a good outcome. So it's not just amber to amber. On the previous report, that 31 to over 23 was marked as reds in the previous report. So
starts with Will, if that's correct.
Yes. Oh, well, yes. Is that correct, Will? Is that right?
I would have to check the previous reports.
Yeah.
and come back to you, but it certainly looks like it ought to have been with such a high performance. So yes, that's either way, it's a significant improvement from 31 down to 26, which we can see from the trend graph as well.
Good. And just one overall question, because we seem to have gained a KPI in PG13, but compared to the previous report, we've down to there's 50, and the previous one had 54. So we've gained one. So we lost 5 KPIs. Is that correct? Just adding up from the RAG numbers, I've got red 5, amber 11, green 32, not NA 2, 50. And the last time, I think I had 4 red, 15 amber, 34 green, and 1 NA, which is 54. So I just wondered, do KPIs come and go? I'm not quite sure what the mechanism is here. So
judging by that, they were all green.
I can only apologise. They absolutely shouldn't do. I should go away and check my maths across those two previous reports. I'm not aware that we've taken anything out. So I think we've given you everything for Q2 that we gave you in Q1. We did split out one of them just to give a bit more granularity for 13 and PG13 and 13A. It might just be my poor mathematics.
Okay, thanks. So no more questions on Q2. Would like to just thank Stephen and all the officers for giving us their expertise. Thank you very much. So moving on to 64, affordable housing strategy.
Yes, and that's me, I think, to lead on this. And I know Francis is here, who will be able to answer any detailed questions you've got. But if I can just give a short introduction and then hand over to Francis for any points she wishes to highlight, and then open it up to questions. I hope it's obvious why we need an affordable housing strategy. Affordable housing is something we desperately need more of in the borough. We know that in the last few decades there's been substantial building in Wokingham Borough. Our population has gone up by 15% between the most recent census and the previous one. Now, the normal assumption that developers favour is that the more houses you build, the price comes down and housing becomes more affordable. It's very clear that the reverse has happened here. More houses have produced higher price. And that's quite simply because we are so close to London that there's an almost inevitable gravitational pull. It's gone on for generations, but it's become accentuated in recent years. The pandemic and working from home has accelerated the process unquestionably. And there's been an increased number of people moving from London and some other areas, but predominantly from London into this area in the last 5-6 years. The challenge is that because there is this almost insatiable demand, it means local housing need continues to be priced out of the market. So that really means that the only viable way in which people are going to get homes to live in is by different forms of affordable housing, and that could be discounted market housing, shared ownership schemes, or social rental. And realistically, for many people, social rental is the best of those options. So it's with those kind of considerations in mind and those pressures in mind that you, I think, need to understand this affordable housing strategy. It's seeking to address a number of different things, not just the overall housing need, but the need in certain specialist areas in particular. And I think I've probably given you enough background, so I'm going to just hand over to Frances. Although I would like to thank Frances and her team for all the work they've put in on this strategy. It's been a great pleasure working with them. And there is one just very small point I want to make before we move over to Frances's presentation on this, or comments on it, and that is the identification of our relative success over the last few years in delivering a good number of affordable housing schemes. But unfortunately, there's still a lot more to do, even though we are, compared with many other councils, actually good at delivering affordable housing. We still need to deliver more. So Frances, over to you.
Thank you, Stephen. So just to kind of highlight, so this is very much a framework document. So underneath this housing strategy will set other housing policies and strategies, including the young person's housing strategy. We've got a homeless and rough sleeping strategy as well. We've got the allocations policy and so on. But this will be accompanied by a more detailed action plan, which we will refresh each year. And that will have more kind of like details in that. So as Stephen said, we really want to maximise affordable housing delivery. That's a key thing here, and especially the kind of the social rented 10 years. So in terms of our kind of key priorities going forward, the most important thing has always been around addressing and understanding our housing needs. We've got a real need for specialist accommodation, so it's finding that suitable accommodation options for our most vulnerable residents. The third one is around ensuring those homes are healthy, safe, efficient, environmentally sustainable and well designed. And the fourth one is really around not just kind of delivering homes and houses, but it's building those communities as well. So it's creating that kind of added value and making sure that there is inclusive growth and there's thriving communities. Partnership is a key part of this strategy as well. We've got our registered provider partners we work very closely with. They help us deliver affordable housing. We've got a tenant and landlord improvement panel as well, but also looking to partners such as the integrated care boards with the NHS and so on. So that's going to be a key part of the strategy too. Public consultation wise, we'll be going out to public consultation fairly imminently. This is due to go to executive in March and it will go on to full council in June time. And just to highlight one thing in the report and just bring it to your attention, we've also just mentioned the allocations policy and taking away a requirement for those key workers to have lived within the borough for the previous 5 years. What we want to do is really support the local economy and looking at people such as kind of care workers or social workers. So as long as they work within the borough, then they should be able to get key worker accommodation. And I think that's probably it in a nutshell. Very happy to take kind of questions or comments.
Andy.
Thank you. I've got one to start with, which is very, I think, linked to what you've just said, and it's on page 86. And it is what are we going to do? How will we address our priorities? And it's the third segment down. There's more opportunities for supporting the local economy in key sectors such as social care. And then when you read the bullet point, it says explore the possibility of short-term tenancies for transit for temporary key workers on short-term contracts where this supports sectors such as social care, good, or creative industries. So I was quite stunned to see this, and all I can imagine is that at some point someone has thought it would be a good idea if we put up what I can only imagine will be flats for contract workers near the Shinfield Film Studios who are coming into the borough on a short-term basis. So I can't imagine any other sort of creative industry. And this seems to me not something that the borough should be concerned about. We should be concerned about housing the many families on our housing list. We should be concerned about people in supermarkets or baristas, all sorts of other parts of the economy which aren't care. And now we're doing stuff for Shinfield Film Studios. If the studios want to build accommodation for their people, let them build. But I don't think it should be part of our strategy. Now, have I jumped the gun on that? Is my question to you.
Yeah, I'm very happy to take this one. So we saw the kind of key worker accommodation in addition to the affordable housing accommodation. So yes, absolutely, the priority needs to be people on our housing register, and that's first and foremost the absolute priority. So the key worker accommodation, and I can't see the borough doing lots of it. We've got certain schemes, but it's where we can support the kind of local economy where we can. And we know there are quite a lot of people who need to come in. It's the kind of the most important bit is the kind of the care workers who we may be working kind of shorter term contracts and so on. So I think within the kind of the key worker accommodation, it's going to be the people who are supporting it. It's the adult social care sector primarily, I would say.
Yeah, I absolutely get that. No one will have a problem with that, but it's the whole creative industries thing. And if I would just take it out, because this is going to end up on all sorts of other related council planning documents. People will be, we'll have housing associations bidding to put up houses that in a relationship with the film studios, and it's going to be a disaster, a public relations disaster, if we are building houses for or approving, houses for the film industry, just for the film industry, because that's what it looks like. The care thing is a totally separate thing. I think we all agree on that. But to put creative industries in there, it's weird. I would love to. I don't know who else has got the microphone. I would love to know how that got in there. What was the flow of conversations that made people think it was a good idea, and that is so specific. It's not people on low incomes.
Do you know, Andy, I'm going to make a comment. I know I bring with me some real sound disruption every time I speak, but it was just to say we'll relook at the wording for that and take that away. I think it's about the duality of supporting the economy, because that at the end of the day gives the jobs that people need, and at the same time making sure that there's affordable housing as well. So we will take that away and we will reword it.
Sorry, Ran, can I just say, once you've turned your microphone off, sorry, thank you. Can I just say that there isn't a shortage of jobs. What we have is people who are working and living at home, and they can't get a house. They can't, and you know that. I don't need to tell you that. The problem isn't the way you've just expressed it. It's the other way around. There's plenty of jobs. It's where do people live on the low wages, and it's our job, as the rest of the strategy is about, to try and alleviate that problem, not to tailor it to creative. So this is literally going to be a carpenter from Watford or something coming down to work on a set, or somebody doing digital or something based in the middle of London, and they're coming down.
And if
so there's no local jobs in there because they're temporary.
And if somebody's creative industry, they should be paying a decent amount of money that allows people to buy a sensible house or rent a sensible house. Yeah. I completely agree with you.
There are different categories of key worker here that we are talking about, and I think there is key worker for which this is really important.
They are valuable. One at a time, please. One at a time, please.
Just say no one is disagreeing with the key workers, but no one is defining the creative industries as a key worker, unless you're running an orchestra, which we're not yet.
I understand your point, and I think that is something we need to look at. I mean, it did say explore the possibility, so that was the get out of jail card in this case. But I think you've raised a valid point.
Is there a definitive list of what Woking Borough Council considers a key worker?
I believe that there is. There is, and it was recently a matter of some discussion, I seem to recall.
So what we say is somebody who earns under a certain threshold, who supports the local economy. So it could not, it doesn't necessarily just need to be public sector, but could also be kind of somebody in a shop worker or a barista or so on. So it's somebody who supports a local economy within the borough. And I think the current threshold, it used to be 30,000, but we're going to raise that in line with kind of inflation each year. So looking at probably April time is going to be about.
But doesn't everybody who's employed in the borough support the local economy?
Well, they wouldn't be eligible for key worker housing if they earned more than the threshold.
So we're not talking about key workers, we're just talking about workers on a low income. I always thought key workers were the people that we, you know, social workers, nurses, care workers, people that
which are
we
all
desperately
included.
need to be able to live and work in our borough. And as Andy said, we learned during the pandemic that people working in our food shops are essential workers as well. But I can't accept that it's everybody on a low income. We have to make some definition of who we're giving this exceptional help to.
Okay, well, I think, should we make this some sort of recommendation to alter the report? Just,
It's on a different point, right? Okay. Myself.
Okay, Chris.
It is on the same point, and it is a quick one. It's the statement that it is key sectors such as social care, education is in there as well. So I don't think we need to have specifics in the text that say such as another statement for social care or creative industries. We've already made the statement it is key sectors such as its key workers. And I look at the creative industries one and I reflect back on my last visit to Shinfield Studios with the execs in there, and the amount of business accommodation in there is unoccupied. And already broached the topic to them, what if the Reading were to look at converting that to short-term accommodation along the lines of student accommodation? And they do favourably look upon that as an idea. So is there not an approach that we could make towards Reading University, who have the input to those buildings, to say, you've got all this empty space, it's going begging, can it be converted to accommodation?
Well,
I think the answer to that, in short, is we probably could. We could certainly talk to them about it. We have a work stream, just to go back, if I may, to an earlier item on the agenda. We have a work stream called Economic Development and Growth in our strategic partnership work with the university. And that would be the proper venue to raise that, I think.
Okay, well, I mean, this is a framework document, isn't it? So we don't want to be digging down into too much specifics here. I mean, there's a definition of what a key worker is, and I think that that there's a list of what those things are. So
myself.
Okay, Andrew.
Thanks. I'd like to make three brief comments and then ask one question. The first is, but firstly, I'd like to say that I consider this to be a really, really important and well-produced document. It's a multifaceted, affordable housing strategy, comprising a number, of, I suppose you could call them sub-documents or something similar. Now, I mentioned that it is multifaceted, but when the young person's housing strategy came before Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny last week, I think it was, Chris and Ian Pittock raised a very, very important point, which the executive have been alerted to, and I hope officers also.
Yeah.
And that is, we don't need to discuss it, but just to flag it up.
Well,
okay.
Let me just say, if I may, I know exactly what it was, because of course I was there presenting that young person's report. It was about military veterans, amongst being disproportionately well represented amongst the homeless. I did pass, well, I think Frances was there listening to that discussion, so she picked it up, but I did pass on to Frances that we would need to give some recognition of that in the final version of the affordable housing strategy. That was only last week. This was prepared and this report was prepared before that meeting, so we haven't had a chance to incorporate it yet, but I'm sure we will be able to incorporate something in there.
I think Chris wants to say something on that.
If I can just expand upon that, the reason to bring it to that conversation was that we were talking about the care leavers, the 16, 17-year-olds. And a lot of the care leavers see the military as an escape route. So they're moving from one element of care to another element of care. And they do short service terms, 6 years, and they may not find it's not to their liking, or we look at it, it's a pyramidical environment where if you don't go up the tree, you're out. So they do find themselves out looking for accommodation, and where do they go? Because they lose everything. They've lost their support, their care regime, their dental, their medical, everything's gone all of a sudden, and they find themselves out under the age of 25, and they fall in that bracket, in that age group of they've been leave carers at 16, 17, gone into one care environment, which is the military, and then suddenly they're out and lost everything. So that's why I brought it up. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks, Stephen, for sort of initiating action on this so promptly. Two other quick comments and then a question. I personally welcome the removal of the local connection criteria for key workers in the council's allocation policy. I think that's important, and it's completely unrelated to the previous discussion. So I think that's a welcome step. Priority 4, I think, is also really important, but I would like to stress one thing in particular. I would like to suggest that specific reference is made to providing affordable housing across the borough to assist people to remain close to family and other social networks and employment. And I think it's also important that affordable housing, and we are doing this, we are ensuring this, I believe, in our borough, but I think it's important to have to recognise that affordable housing is of a quality and an appearance that makes it indistinguishable from any other housing. As I say, I believe that we're doing a really good job of that, in this borough, and I hope that continues. My question is about priority 1, okay, and it's about understanding, affordable housing, needs. And this, of course, is an incredibly complex and dynamic, issue. I don't want necessarily any specific detailed answer at this point, but I just want to ask, are we confident, that we're attempting detailed forecasting? So, for instance, okay, we are likely, I suspect, to find a very, very rapid escalation in the number of baby boomers living in market rental accommodation who are either about, to be reaching retirement or have recently reached retirement age, and may find it a real struggle, to continue to afford market rental accommodation. And I think that the numbers involved could be very, very significant and could include many, many individuals and families who never anticipated that they would be in that situation. So there's an example, of a forecasting need. The report also acknowledges the increasing proportion of residents with long-term health needs. This is an inevitable consequence, of aging, but this will only increase again, probably very, very rapidly with our population aging. So again, there's a need, for to at least attempt what we can do, in terms of, of forecasting, and to try to be proactive where possible, and at least to be aware, of what some of the things on the horizon, challenges and opportunities, are likely to be on the horizon. So.
Just to kind of give you a very quick response on that. So we have done quite a lot of kind of need assessment work, and especially around those kind of vulnerable groups. So we just did a specialist housing needs assessment, which looked at the kind of projections for learning disabled over the next 10 years, looked at kind of people potentially with kind of mental health issues and complex needs, physical disabled. And that's really helping to inform when we're trying to get our future supply. So when we're negotiating with developers and so on, helps inform what we need to do. And then within that kind of needs assessment as well, there we got recommendations that kind of around best practice, which we're also trying to incorporate in. But that just gives you a small example of where we're trying to predict the needs, but also respond to them, looking at that kind of future pipeline.
Could I also just very briefly come in on your point, Andrew, about the building in a way that makes it impossible to distinguish between different tenures. I think that's a really important point. What I would say to try and offer you some reassurance is obviously a high proportion of our affordable housing is delivered through market housing schemes as a developer contribution. We always try to ensure that the design is of a high quality. But we do deliver some ourselves, and obviously the big flagship project for the council is Course Ride. And there, I should take you to Course Ride, Andrew, and show you something of the quality of the housing that's coming up there. It really is impressive. I would certainly love to live in some of those houses. They're very nice. They're really good quality. And they're incredibly sustainable, and the cost of living in them will be greatly reduced by the way we've been able to make them energy efficient and environmentally very, very good.
Alison. Oh, so okay, Pauline.
Just the other good thing about Course Ride, I think, is that we've managed to make more efficient use of the ground. So people have still got their own space, but there's actually more houses in there than there were under the previous scheme. So not only are they warm,
it's an expansion,
not made out of cardboard.
It's not just a regeneration, it's an expansion. Yeah. Yes,
so
absolutely
it's
right.
a good scheme, I think.
I'd just like to ask Francis a question. So on page 77 in summary, we're removing the 5-year rule, but future applications for the key worker scheme, they need to work within Woking and Barrow. What happens when somebody changes job? Because obviously, it's never very far. If you're a key worker living in Woodley, working in Woking and Barrow, you can quite easily get the bus and go and work in a care home in Reading. What happens then, and how do you know where they work?
So we'd know at the point of them applying for their tenancy. So normally our key worker schemes are done through our registered providers. So they would do a kind of time limited checks, and they're reliant on that kind of key worker telling them where their place of work is. So this is more to do at the point of their application. So they need to live within the borough at the point of application.
No, I wouldn't like to think that we were turfing any of our residents out of our homes. But again, we're creating this key worker housing to enable us to, keep people working in the roles we need in the borough. It's a very difficult topic.
It certainly is, and we also need to bear in mind the tenancies that key worker will get. So quite a lot of times within registered providers, they will get a 5-year fixed term tenancy. So it's up to that registered provider then if they want to then bring that tenancy to a close, if they feel that that tenant has then changed jobs or changed location.
Can we just be careful about this? Because a lot of our key workers live in Bracknell and Reading as well. And if everybody made people move when they moved jobs, you would end up in a very disadvantageous position that moves people around, costs them money moving, costs a lot of things, and actually would probably damage our supply of key workers as well. I think we're just going to be a bit sensible about this before we start shifting people around because they happen to move their jobs. It just needs to be balanced.
Well, we need to be able to offer something attractive to encourage key workers such as care workers to come to the borough. And we are competing, of course, in salary terms with Bracknell in particular, because Bracknell offer out of London waiting, which we can't. So we have to find other ways of attracting people that we need to support our residents who are in need. So key worker housing is one of the ways in which we can do that.
Yeah, I understand that. We just need to be careful that we don't essentially lock people into working in a particular organisation with their housing, which then becomes essentially a tied house. I'm just a bit worried if you take that to its extreme.
I think that there clearly is a bit of flexibility in the sense that most of this key worker housing, in fact, I think all of it will be delivered through
our registered provider partners, not through the council's HRA stock. So that means that these registered providers who offer 5-year leases obviously have the opportunity to review if they feel that they no longer want to have somebody there who's working a long way away, then they will do that. But I doubt if they're going to be brutal and kick people out if they work 2 miles across the border from. So I think there's a bit more flexibility in the system than perhaps you might think.
I was just worried about the way the discussion was going, that was all.
Okay, and anyway, the once you complete your 5-year tenancy, you'll qualify anyway. So.
Indeed, you would have the local connection anyway, so you'd have an entitlement.
So, Andy.
Yeah, just following on from that, it wasn't my main point, but there's also a thing if someone is a care worker and they're going to open university or something and they're trained to be something wonderful like an accountant, then suddenly they will also lose their property, won't they? So it is this idea of a tied property.
Well, I think if they train to be an accountant, they're probably not going to need any form of housing.
Or they train to be a purchase ledger clerk, and then which is an easier role, but it pays a little bit more, but not enough. There's a danger that, but also we're outsourcing again, aren't we? We're talking about registered providers, but we're outsourcing the responsibility for the decision making to somebody else. And
well, we don't have a great deal of choice, Andy. I'm afraid we can't actually do it all on our own.
Well, again, this is something. Wasn't the point I was going to make now, but I will make it now. Is that some members may remember that the corporate and community Scrutiny group had a task and finish group on registered providers and the problems associated with registered providers. And we still seem to be willing to throw stuff at registered providers. One of the things which came out of that task and finish group was that the borough didn't have a contact list of the registered providers that were in the borough. So we have I think it was also clear in those meetings that our main interest with registered providers was, could they build some houses? It was nothing about the service levels of the tenants, and yet we still seem to be in the same place where we're just going to throw our tenants into
We go through a process, Andy, on a regular basis, where we establish a list of preferred registered providers, and we went through this process recently. It was more rigorous than it's been before. It involved interviewing, it involved submission of paperwork, interviewing, and effectively having to sign up to a set of conditions. So we are trying to exert more control over registered providers. But unfortunately, the simple fact of life is the legislative framework has led to a proliferation of registered providers. We are lucky in Wokingham that our tenants resisted the attempts of the council in previous years to transfer its stock. And we are very lucky that we still have an HRA. It's an HRA that I would dearly like to grow so it could become more viable, because obviously the problem with the HRA, it's a ring-fenced fund that relies on the income from rent, effectively covering the cost of maintenance and repair. And as your housing stock gets older, you're more liable to have costs for repair and maintenance, but your income base is not growing. So adding properties to the HRA is one of my ambitions, but there is a limit to how much we can do, unfortunately.
Thank you. I don't know if you're trying to scratch my back or not, but I remember.
No, I'm not trying to.
I very well remember.
I've learned that that's a pointless exercise.
I very well remember the first Labour Party meeting I ever went to in, I think it was 1989, and a tenant came in and said the council want to sell our houses to a housing association, and we organised the tenants for that one to make sure they were able to resist. So we did it 2 or 3 more times.
It was the only people who were organising tenants. We were.
Trust me, we were. Anyway, so my original question that I was going to ask, in the spirit of trying to add some value to this, and you were talking about the legislative framework, there is a very, very good chance that in the next year or two, and hopefully the legislative framework is going to change. And so my question is how easy is it going to be to rapidly revisit this strategy to take into account the opportunities that may be afforded by changes to the legislation? Because if I'm hearing all sorts of wonderful things, as you'd expect, about making it easier for councils to buy land at the original cost of the original production, the original use of the land rather than the inflated value. There's all sorts of things that could happen. So what assurances can the officers and you give us that actually, if there is a rapid change in the legislative framework, we can take advantage of that in this and not be bound by this for the next 4 years?
We would, I'm sure, if there were major legislative changes that changed the landscape substantially, we would want to revise our affordable housing strategy. I've absolutely no doubt. If there were opportunities, we would want to take them.
Hey, Pauline.
Thank you. I just wanted.
I hope that wasn't conceived as scratching your back, Andy.
I just wanted to follow on from the registered provider conversation, and the other thing that we talked about at Adobe and Scrutiny in Community and Corporate was making better use of our own registered provider, which we've got, which we could potentially use to develop some of the housing using the commuted sums or the affordable housing allocation for developers, and I think we should be doing more of that.
I think there is a report coming to. I don't think it's this committee. I think it's Community and Corporate next week on the Altair report into the council-owned housing companies, and they recommend a way forward that is well, we'll be able to discuss at that meeting. But it has some quite radical proposals in it for trying to improve the performance of the housing companies.
And the reason I say that is because I think the affordable housing, the affordable housing that our registered provider provides is actually good quality, and the service, I think, from the council can be better than some of the registered providers. And some of them are fine, some of them are not.
The service the council provides to its tenants, in my view, is infinitely better than the service provided by registered providers.
Okay, Andy.
Thank you. So in the successes since the last housing strategy, there are, which is on page, where is it? Page 86. There are a couple of examples of their
very small print on it.
It is very small print. I'm sorry. There's a couple of examples of grant funding being awarded, which is obviously good news. What I wasn't clear about was the exact name of the grant funding. One of them has come from the Single Homelessness Accommodation Programme, but I wasn't sure about the name of the scheme that had given us money for the refugees.
Oh, this is the Afghan rehab.
Yeah, that's
resettlement scheme.
Yeah. But I know the government has this an affordable housing grant, and I know that a lot of the money nationally from the affordable housing grant was returned to the Treasury. It was underspent. And I'm wondering, is there a risk that we've ever left any sort of application on the table, any grant money on the table? It did seem to me the criteria were quite broad, and that we might qualify. And I was just wondering.
I'm not aware of anything that we haven't applied for that we thought was going to help us deliver more housing.
No.
No, we've always to chip in. We've always maximised what grant funding is out there. So we've got a very good relationship with Homes England, who do quite a lot of the affordable housing kind of grant award, and we've done very well with them in the past. That is something where you apply to them on a kind of site-by-site basis. But as I say, we've always been well kind of awarded by Homes England, and certainly through kind of central government as well.
Okay. There's a tiny footnote to the Afghan resettlement scheme. Those properties are obviously being purchased for Afghan families. But at some stage in the future, it's entirely possible, and this perhaps goes back to an earlier discussion about people moving, that they would choose to move from the area. Those properties will then become available for general use in the HRA. So it's an extremely good scheme on lots of levels, I think.
Okay, so yes, we're just asked to note this report. Is there any more? Yes, Andy will say one more thing.
Sorry, it's just a general thing. I mean, I may have missed it, but it was disappointing to not see any mention at all of council housing. And I know And I don't, if I've missed it, my apologies, but we all know, I think, that social housing that social rental housing is the key. And we also know the best provider of social rented housing is local authorities. And I appreciate there are limits. I appreciate how little we have done in that area over the last 25, 30 years. And I appreciate that we've just in the last few years completed our first units of proper council housing. But I don't know, the expression council housing, it resonates with people. When they see affordable housing, I think somewhere in the report, it talks about property costing £500,000 affordable, 400,000 is still, it's not affordable, it's just a bit cheaper. So I don't know, we need to talk more about council housing.
Well, I talk incessantly.
I know you do, but
my colleagues would tell me
but the
about the
strategy
HRA.
I know, but the strategy doesn't.
HRA housing. I think it is implicit in here. Maybe it isn't as explicit as it could be.
But related to that is this. I mean, a very helpful officer, and it might have been Francis a few years ago, sent me a breakdown of the affordable housing that we had constructed to date, and all of the categories were all very worthy, but when you actually, and I think the figure at the time was 550 or 600, but when you broke it down, there were 60 units or something like that were in Foster's care home. There was another 55 units in another care home. There were 40 units of this stuff. And when you actually broke it down, those affordable houses to just somebody coming off the housing list, it was actually a much lower number.
Yeah.
And we have to provide housing for the vulnerable groups, but you also have to provide housing for the people who don't qualify under any of the vulnerable sort of categories.
I know, it's a big challenge. It is a big challenge.
But I guess in the report we give this big number, and then the other big number we give is households on the register, and they sort of seem to be the same thing, and they're not the same thing. They're different.
But I think,
I guess it's that clarity over what we're providing, who's benefiting. That's what I was looking for.
Well, I do think all affordable housing is beneficial to someone, and I think they are members of our community. There are many people who need specialist housing, which is usually provided by registered providers rather than the HRA, and that specialist housing is not only vital to the people who are going to occupy it. It also, of course, in the long run will help save the council a lot of money. So it is important. We need more temporary accommodation, because if we've got more temporary accommodation, we have to rely less on emergency accommodation, which when someone becomes homeless, we have a duty to house them. If we haven't got any temporary accommodation or any long-term accommodation available, we have to pay for bed and breakfast. And that's dreadful for the people involved. It's totally unsettling and unsatisfactory, but it's very expensive for the council. So everything points to the need for more affordable housing.
And I get that, and no one is going to say that should not be done. Okay, but sometimes it feels like the entirety of our affordable housing it's almost like affordable housing is only for the most vulnerable groups, or for the people who can do part rent. And it just seems this idea that affordable housing should be a bigger provider of just common or garden housing for common or garden families.
Well,
it's just not there.
I think you're wrong. It is there. We have regular meetings where we discuss housing planning applications, and we discuss the affordable housing ask on those applications, and we are all of the same mind that we want to try and increase the social rental component most of all. And obviously there are some sites where we have to vary the percentages, but the social rental we're aiming for is 70% of the affordable. Now that's a really high percentage when you look at this across the board, what happens in other areas. So at the risk of being accused of scratching your back again, I am very committed to the social rental component. I'm very mindful of what you're saying. We also look at different sizes of house. So, the split of house types. And we are always striving to get some 3 and 4 bedroom houses, more of those, because we know there are families who need this kind of housing. So we're not just focused on those who have specialist needs. Those are really important to us, but so is the general housing requirement. I can assure you of that. I know this matters a lot to you, but if it's any consolation, it matters a lot to me too.
Okay, so I think affordable housing is it's an umbrella term until someone comes up with a better one. I think it covers all these things, doesn't it? I think that's.
It does, but Andy makes a really important point. Genuinely affordable housing really is social rental.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I think we just note this, don't we? We're just noting this.
Sorry, Chair.
Okay.
Sorry, related to that. So it's really, really quick. How will we measure success? And in there, how will we measure success? Would the officers consider putting council houses in?
Sorry.
Would the officers consider adding in council houses in there? Because we talk about affordable homes, especially socially rented homes, that is good. We talk about GRT pitches and boat dweller moorings. Why can't we just add in council houses? Well, as a measure of success, because that is a measure of success, separate to socially rented homes.
Well, if you're right about your predictions about the legislative changes that we can expect in the next few years, it will be possible for us to think about setting a target specifically of extension of the HRA, but I'm not sure in the current legislative framework it's as easy as that. So we await eagerly the changes you've promised us.
Okay. So we just note we've noted this before. We've had a discussion. Minutes have been taken.
Chair, can I make a recommendation or propose a recommendation?
Okay.
So although we've been asked to note it, we can still make a recommendation to either to the officers or to the wherever it's going next, that the reference to creative industries not be included.
I think we've already effectively removed that, Andy.
Okay. Do we want to formally
recommend that we remove the example, the such as? I don't think we need that in.
Okay. Do we want to formally make this recommendation then?
I don't think we need to, because the officers have already said that they need that.
Yeah. Okay. So
it's fine for you to make the recommendation, but it's one that you are knocking at not an open door, but a very wide open door.
Right. So who would like to agree Andy's recommendation that creative industries are taken out this stuff? Okay. Carried. Right. Okay.
We're going to have to vote. Thanks, Stephen.
Okay, so
am I allowed to go now?
Thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you very much, Francis and Leanne. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Introduce myself and my wife.
Beyond 10:30.
Thank you, officers.
Sorry, Alice.
Chair, can I just comment on the size of the font of this strategy? I know what Prue Bray would have to say about this. Prue doesn't think anything should ever be in less than 11. I think 10 is okay, but this is tiny. And I know officers are often very keen to try and fit everything onto one page, but it would have been much better to have used more pages and have it at a reasonable legibility.
I think it would be safer if someone quickly proposed that we extend the meeting if necessary beyond 10:30.
No.
Okay, right. If we come to 10:30, we haven't finished. We haven't stopped.
Moving on swiftly to the executive programme on page 99. Has anyone got any comments to make? page 100.
So it's a very, very general one. The Constitutional Review Working Group were discussing abolishing the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee because that came out of a recommendation of a report. So talk to your group leaders about not scrapping it. And at the moment, the group is looking at redoing the work requests, but this is the sort of thing that we do, which no other committee does.
Okay, Andrew.
That would be such a monumental decision, that it is something that actually does need to be discussed by this committee. I'm also personally disappointed, that I didn't. I heard about this through third parties, and I think as members of Overview and Scrutiny Management, we should have been involved in the discussion. So
what happened was that the party representatives in the meeting were supposed to take it up with the group leaders, and the group leaders. But what the group has decided now is there might be a reallocation of work and perhaps a renaming of this committee and a reallocation of work. But perhaps we can't do a full discussion now. But I just wanted to make sure people knew about it.
Okay. So anyone got any more comments on page 101? 102, Chris. 103.
Sarah Curtis,
sorry, Chris.
To Sarah's resignation from the executive position. So that needs and Clive. And Clive. So there's two exec members been noted in there for May 2024.
Page 106.
So there's several pages in there. So it's a general observation that the executive membership has changed and it's not reflected in these.
Okay, I think we've noted that. Going on to IMDs on page 105. No comment. Okay, moving on, and 106. Going on to draft work programs for this committee, page 110. That's today. 811. No comments, right?
Yeah, just going back to the recommendation to abolish Overview and Scrutiny Management, I think that does actually need to come to this committee, and ought to be included in the forward plan.
Okay, Pauline.
Could I ask a question about that? Actually, whose decision is it? Is it full council's decision as to what committees there are? I don't think Constitutional Reworking Group or this can decide that.
I think it has to be. I think it has anything. I'll ask Neil.
So in the past, any changes to the structure of scrutiny has been a report to this committee and then a recommendation to council?
But they can't. But I think what they want is ultimately is where it is now is a discussion about the amount of what work each committee does, because the person who did the review wasn't sure what his committee did, and they were under the impression that all we did was review the work. So it might be a clearer boundary between the work of the R committee and corporate and community, because sometimes everything doesn't overlap.
Can I ask that, are you referring to a review carried out by the Centre for Governance? Is that the review that you're talking about? Okay, well, that was talking about a period of time, so a little while ago. Okay, since which this and other Overview and Scrutiny committees have quite considerably changed the way in which they are operating. So I think to base a recommendation on an external report, an historic report, is not really something that we should just accept, without some critical, critical discussion. So I think this does need to come into the forward programme.
Well, from what Neil said, it has to anyway, so.
Yeah. So, right, we've got half a minute left. So anyone else want to comment on the forward programme? No. Okay, we've got, we're 119 before that? 116. Okay.
The community corporate 2026, I would like to have an amendment issue to there. We will formalise the part of the issue for
Oh, right. Yeah, the beans.
We need that one other member be announced, so we can actually get that covered.
So we're timed out.
Okay.
Can you say that again, please? I missed that. Oh, are you looking for one more member?
We're timed out.
Okay, so, right, this is called the end of the meeting, called the Constitution. So thank you all.